This is Dan Hodgson from the Callous Cowboys, and you are listening to The New Scene.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to The New Scene. I am your host, Keith, and we're back with another brand new episode. And on the show this week, we have the super mega exclusive Deadguy episode featuring the return of Tim Singer. And we talked to Tim about his history discovering punk and hardcore in New York City and his zine Boiling Point, his pre-Deadguy band No Escape, and of course, there's plenty of Deadguy talk, and we talk about the making of their new album, Near Death Travel Services. And in addition to Tim, we welcome Deadguy's drummer, Dave Rosenberg, to the show for the very first time. Dave gives us a full rundown on the new LP, and he tells us about how he taught himself guitar over the years and how some of the riffs he wrote became songs on the new Deadguy LP. And he gives us a lot of interesting insight on the band and his own personal history. This is a blockbuster episode. I'm so happy to have Tim and Dave on the show. Deadguy is one of my favorite bands in the world of hardcore, metal, etc. I first got turned on to them in, I think, 2010-ish. I first got turned on to them by Pat Shannon from All Else Failed. We used to be in a band together called Crash of 64, and All Else Failed are huge Deadguy fans. I knew about the band. I had certainly heard the name. I had certainly listened to them before, but those guys really turned me on to them, and I've been a fan ever since then. Those conversations are coming up shortly, but first, here's how you can support The New Scene. Rate us 5 stars on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. We have a main channel with full video episodes and a clips channel with clips from select episodes. We have shirts for sale at our store at Deathwish Inc. Pick one up. It's a great way to support the show. And you can follow us on social media at New Scene Pod. Also, don't forget to support Iodine Recordings. Modern Life is War, Life on the Moon. This is a co-release from Iodine Recordings and Deathwish Inc. Life on the Moon is the bold return of Modern Life is War, their first studio album in over a decade. The first single, Johnny Gone, is out there now on streaming services. Check it out and pre-order the record. The street date on this one is Friday, September 5th. For more information, head to iodinerecordings.com, sign up for the newsletter, and you can follow the label on Instagram at Iodine Recordings. And don't forget to support our sponsor for the month of June, Mind Over Matter Records. Mind Over Matter Records is an independent record label founded by Austin Keane in 2009, and it's home to releases from a ton of bands you know and love: Zayo, The Juliana Theory, Evergreen Terrace, and more. Post-hardcore band Mission to Sleep have just released their LP, A Spark or the End. Make sure you check out the record on streaming services, and you can order the LP now at mindovermatterrecords.com. A second pressing of the new self-titled record from Oriska just went up in 2 new colors. You can order direct from mindovermatterrecords.com, deathwishinc.com, and if you're in Europe, Deathwish Europe and Devil Dog Distro have the record in their stores. And my band, Memory Entry, just released our debut EP called Our World is Going to Disappear. The iodine variant of the record is sold out, but there's still a couple left at mindovermatterrecords.com. Make sure you grab one while supplies last. I think there is less than 10 left. We also have 2 new t-shirts to go along with the EP. And don't forget to check out the latest single from Ben. It's called Passions of Great Misfortune, and their debut LP will be coming out on Mind Over Matter Records. And there's a lot of other great music to check out at Mind Over Matter Records. Her Head's on Fire, Dad Hats, Shady Side, and tons more. For more information, head to mindovermatterrecords.com, and you can follow the label on Instagram at MOM Records. Okay, so first up is Tim Singer, and immediately following that, we'll hear from Dave Rosenberg. Enjoy. All right, we are here now with Tim Singer. Tim, welcome back to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me, man.
Yes, Tim, it's great to have you back here. It's been a couple years and a lot has been going on. Deadguy just surprise announced to all of us the announcement of near-death travel services, the new Deadguy LP, which I'm excited about. Many people are excited about. And look, you've been up to that and a lot of other things, which I want to ask you about. But first, I want to ask you, how are you doing today?
Pretty good, all things considered, in the state of the world, I suppose, right?
Yeah.
Those of us who are fans of things like freedom and empathy are probably struggling a little bit right now, if you're on American soil. But overall, personally, can't really complain, right? Like, I feel super grateful that I'm back doing the music thing and people seem to be digging it. So overall, feeling pretty good.
That's good. That's good. How much do you follow the news? Do you read a lot of stuff? Do you follow a lot of what's going on?
I follow quite a bit, honestly, without trying to get. I mean, it's like, I don't know. I can't watch the talking heads, like the shows where it's like, here's one topic and they dangle this sort of headline carrot, and then they get a bunch of sort of professional assholes to talk about it. And I can't get into that. So I try to find like YouTube channels, like, or people talk about stuff in real ways, things like Under the Desk News or Bulwark. And just to like not let the exhaustion make me apathetic, right? Not that I consider myself some sort of activist, so to speak. But I just feel like we all have to stay in the mix, stay fighting for shit that matters, even if it's just intellectually, right? Like not just caving in. So yeah, I'm a bit of a junkie.
Yeah, if I'm reading something, it's not a mainstream news source. Now, I'm not reading like wilderness survival wacko conspiracies or anything like that. But my personal beliefs, I think Democrats and Republicans are this, two sides of one coin. So
Right.
if I'm reading stuff, it's not, hey, the Democrats saying this, or hey, the Republicans saying that. It's more of a high level overview of things that are going on, right? But some of the stuff, I have friends who read the news a lot. I don't. I'm somewhat informed, but I also just don't read a lot of it because I'm so busy with other things that some of the things my friends tell me, I almost can't believe. Like I was at band practice and my friend was like, hey, when you come back into the country, when you come back into the US from another country, they search your phone to see if you posted any pro-Palestine or anti-America stuff. And then if you did, they won't let you back in. And
Right.
I almost couldn't believe that. I was like that's actually happening? That's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's like here's the funny thing. Like, I am personally an immigrant, right? I just happen to be a Caucasian immigrant from Europe. But my oldest sister has a permanent green card, right? And we were like supposed to have this big family trip. My stepmother's Chinese. We were all going to go to China. She's afraid to travel because they might give her shit for coming. Like, it's just like weird, dumb shit, right? And that's a bougie problem. But it's sort of like, or you hear about people who have restaurants and like their employees are afraid to leave the house and shit like that. So it's like, it's gotten creepier. It's at its creepiest level, right? And I'm of an age where my parents grew up in World War II Europe. My father born in 1930, my mother born in 31. She's raised in Germany at that time, right? He's raised in Holland at that time. So there's a backdrop of this, like, that my parents grew up in, right, leading to World War II. Where you hear I've heard stories from my grandparents and stuff like that, where it just seemed otherworldly, and now it doesn't, right? Like, now you can go on YouTube and see ice videos that are creepy as fuck. So, yeah, I don't know. Shit's kind of real.
It's these are things you used to read about in other countries and you'd be like, wow, things are really crazy over there, and now it's happening here. It feels like things have been on a steady decline since, I don't know, 2001. And I don't know if it's ever going to turn back around, but I hope it does. And I know
Right.
you probably do too. You've got kids, you've got a family.
Yeah, my kids are all the age I was when we started Deadguy, right? Or when I started No Escape, somewhere in that age range, right? So it's kind of I kind of think of like what was my world like, and I was worried about like the Gulf War and Bush, the first Bush starting all that bullshit, and then there's stuff we were all fired up about. We were marching on Washington about abortion rights and all that kind of shit, and I just feel like all that stuff we've just taken 2 steps back, and hopefully we take some steps forward. It's also really interesting. I raised my kids in a time when the first president they knew of, and for 8 years was Obama, right? Where it's like, hey, we live in this country where there's a black president. Like when I was growing up, I didn't even think that was possible, right? So there's this sort of hopefulness that maybe culture is forcing, because you and I we probably share the same cynicism about national politics and all the money in it and the corporate interests and yada yada. But at least I was like, with all that said, we still elected this black dude who was raised by his grandmother. Like, you know what I mean? Like there was still some nugget of a story in there that you could feel good about, right?
Yeah.
Now there's none of that.
There's just zero. There is zero hope. There, even I don't know. Even when Joe Biden got elected, I felt good because things seemed a little lighter. That still wasn't even very happy. The quote I think of the most with him was, I think he said like fundamentally nothing will change, and I was like, yeah, that's right. That's what it feels like. Nothing will change. So,
right. Yeah.
I don't know. It's just you said you were born. You said you were an immigrant. Where were you born?
I was born in the Netherlands, in right outside of Amsterdam, this town called Haarlem, and I'm the youngest of 4. So, we had gone back and forth between the States and Europe in the 50s into the late 60s. I was born in 68. And we moved back to America, I think permanently in like 1970. So I didn't get the cool stuff. I didn't get to be bilingual. My sisters both speak Dutch and, that kind of stuff. And they have memories of it, right? Like I don't have memory of it. I just, I know I grew up with parents with very thick accents, and I was not your typical sort of American kid in that regard, right? Like Thanksgiving never meant a thing to us, right? Like that kind of stuff.
So you have 4 siblings.
Yeah, I'm the youngest of 4. Yeah.
Oh wow! So you're the youngest.
Yeah, I'm the accidental baby, I think, because my mom was like 38, 39 when she had me, and back then that was really old to have a kid,
Yeah. It's more. It's a lot more common now. People wait longer and have less kids because there's no money. So
that's true. Yeah.
I'm curious. I don't think I asked you this last time. The world of hardcore punk, all of that stuff. How did you get turned on to it?
Well, my older brother, I'd probably credit with starting. He's 4 years older. We were like sort of your typical disaffected suburban juvenile delinquents, right? Like we were just angry kids of broken family, and we didn't fit in with the jocks. We weren't rich. We weren't the popular kids, and he discovered punk rock, Sex Pistols, Clash, that kind of stuff. He started going to shows in New York and seeing like Black Flag and bands like that, or hanging out at CBGBs and coming home with stories, right? And so I'd just hang out in his bedroom and play his records and sort of think how cool that shit was. I remember distinctly seeing a Dead Kennedys 7-inch that said "Too drunk to fuck." Like, can you say, like, is that allowed? Right? Like, I'm like 13, 14 at the time. And then probably when I was like 15, I started going to New York regularly, going to record stores like Bleecker Bob's and Venus Records and stuff like that, and just trying to like pick up all the punk stuff I could. Because, in his room, it was like Sex Pistols, Clash, Suicidal Tendencies. And I remember buying like the Misfits, Walk Among Us, that kind of stuff. And it just snowballs. And then like you start going to New York shows, right? Like, and you start seeing like Agnostic Front and Reagan Youth and Youth of Today and Cro-Mags and that kind of shit.
Yeah. So you were 15 taking the train into New York City from where?
From Summit, New Jersey and Westfield, New Jersey. So it's just, the burbs, the true burbs, where it's like, The train station at 5-6 o'clock every day would be a bunch of dudes in suits. It was almost a cool visual because I used to be at the top of the parking lot because we used to skate up there, right? And if you were there when the train came in from Wall Street, right, you just see all these dark suits just sort of leave. It was such a distinct visual. All these sort of mysterious Wall Street dads, right? They were all the dads of my friends that you never really met the dads because they were either at work or golfing or something, right? Like you knew the moms, you didn't know the dads,
Yeah.
But I lived like on the poor side of town in like this 1-bedroom apartment kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. It sounds like a pretty similar upbringing to mine. I definitely didn't fit in with the jocks. I didn't really fit in with anybody. I just drew comic books and played video games and recorded my own talk shows. And so then once I found hardcore music, it was just, perfect fit, just all the other misfits in me.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You can go to New York and if you saw someone else with like an Agnostic Front t-shirt from across at Washington Square Park, you'd at least head nod, right? Or you go to the record store and just strike up a conversation, right? And of course shows too, right? Like, so you sort of found your tribe in the old school way. Because at school, I felt like there was like 3 of us, right? And it was like us against them.
Yeah, there was only a few in my school, like, I don't know, 3 total that I can think of. And
exactly.
I went to the type of school where you got made fun of if you did anything that wasn't like playing sports or, I don't know, wearing certain clothes or whatever it was still jocks and rich kids versus everybody else, I guess. And I was not on that side.
No, we're similar. Like I had like my friend was a mod kid, even the deadhead hung out with us, the kid with the mohawk and me with the shaved head. Like that was like it, right? There's like 4 or 5 of us. And and I'd, hang out. I would never go to lunch. I'd hang out in the parking lot and smoke cigarettes and play Minor Threat from the car, that kind of shit,
See, smoking cigarettes and blasting Minor Threat. Now that's cool.
Yeah. I didn't quit smoking until I was like 18 or 19. I smoked in high school, like a true delinquent.
Was it crazy going to New York at that time for shows and everything?
It was. Well, so the first shows I would go to the Ritz a lot, like those Rock Hotel shows. And those are like the bigger shows, like Black Flag would come through or Social Distortion or Dead Kennedys or Circle Jerks with DOA. And they always had the big flyers and they were like wheat pasted all over the city. And they were like, they would draw all us suburban kids, right? Like those to me were like the shows, right? I remember going to see Cro-Mags and it was like insane. And it was like a big thing if you could get your friends to push you up to get up on the stage and you'd run across as fast as you could before the bouncers kicked your ass, that kind of thing. So that was cool and crazy in its own way. Right. And, but you would never in a million years be able to meet the band or anything. It was a very detached experience in that regard. Like there's a big club and you'd go and you buy punk pins or t-shirts or whatever. And hang out with your friends mostly, right? And then figure out a way to get home on the PATH train afterwards. It wasn't until I went to CBGB's, like probably, this was 1986, April of 86, I saw Agnostic Front at CBGB's. And that was like, holy fuck. Like, okay, not only was the band just waist high, right? And you're practically pushed onto stage. Like you can't help but be part of the whole thing. In the pit is like, oh, that's Harley from the Cro-Mags. And that's this dude from it's like the whole thing was like, oh, this is where it really happens, right? On a grassroots sort of local level. And you weren't like even necessarily saying this out loud, like this is the real thing, but you just it just felt different, right? And that was intense because that was like going into that pit was like, holy fuck, you're going home with some battle wounds. It was crazy. Right. But if you fell down, people picked your ass up immediately. Right. So there was like this communal violence. Right. That just felt right.
Was it dangerous at all? Like when I started going to shows in the late 90s in Philly, it was, depending on the show, it was dangerous because there was like gangs and crowd killing. And if you push the wrong person or look at the wrong person, you could get beat up by 10 guys. It just depends. What was it like at that Agnostic Front show? Was it like that too?
No, here's what's funny is like, I know exactly what you're talking about because Philly shows had like a notorious, like sort of white power problem. And the worst violence I've seen is like, because I went to school in Westchester for a year, Westchester, Pennsylvania. So I went to a bunch of shows in the Philly area and other PA areas. And that's where I saw more shit go down. So it was like a lot of weekends we'd make the trek to CB's, but if we didn't, we'd go to more local shows. And those are where I saw more of this sort of crazy violence and less diverse crowds. Like New York was truly the melting pot, right? So you couldn't just be the white power asshole. You'd get your ass handed to you by someone like Gavin Van Vlack or, Sharp, which was like skinheads against racial prejudice. Like there was like so there wasn't that weird cliquey. I mean, there's definitely violence, but it wasn't some hate group, right? We were all in it together in a weird way. I felt very accepted for being a kid from suburbia, right? Hanging out with kids who like grew up in Queens or lived on the street or Brooklyn, places I was probably scared to go to still, you know what I mean? During the day as a kid from the burbs. But yeah, definitely like, I saw some shit in some, Philly area shows or Bethlehem, places like that.
Yeah, I've heard in the 80s there was like a big skinhead problem, and that was pretty much gone by the time I got out there. So it was like, all right, the skinheads are gone, but now we're just getting beat up by hardcore kids. So we just traded one for the other.
Right. Yeah, it's true.
I guess that's better. I guess anyway. Yeah. No, you know what? When I lived in Philly for 9 years, and I lived in Fishtown, Kensington, and so when I was moved to New York City, I was like, Brooklyn. I was like, oh, I'm ready. I lived in the city. I'm ready. And it's just way different up here. And one thing that struck me, now I'm not speaking for all of Philadelphia, but race is a lot more of a focus in Philadelphia than it is up here in a lot of ways with some people. There, I would just hear it talked about a lot more, or I would hear a lot more outright racism. And then when I moved up to New York City, it was just like, it was like so much less of a thing. There was like so many more different kinds of people together. And I was surprised by that.
Yeah. It's surprising, I think, for people to hear like that. Those shows at CB's were like less scary or violent in a way than, some of the smaller cities or even small areas around it. But if you really think about it, it sort of makes sense, right? Like like you can't like try to be a racist asshole unless you're a fucking black belt. You're gonna get your ass handed to you. Like just on any given matinee, these are not all white bands and all white crowds. So, I grew to really, it was a great sort of immersion in a way for a kid from suburbia, where literally there was like the black kids lived on this side of town, the white kids lived on this side of the town. And there's very little of anything else, right? And I was lucky enough to grow up poor enough that I actually lived near the projects, and I hung out with the black kids a lot of the time. So I think I benefited from those experiences growing up, to not become a white douchebag from suburbia. Right? I'm sort of grateful for that, right?
Me too. I never had qualms about hanging out with someone because they were different from me. That was never a thing.
Right.
When I was younger, did I make stupid jokes or laugh at stupid jokes? Yeah, probably sometimes. But just hanging out with people, like, I don't know, that was never a thing. I was just like, if you're cool, I'll hang out with you. That's it. So when did you start Boiling Point Zine? Was that, did you do that before you started singing in bands?
Yes.
Okay. Like, how old were you when the zine gets started?
So that was 86. I was 18. I was at college at Westchester, like I was talking about. And my stepbrother, who was one of the other 4 punk rock kids in high school, he was going to college up in Boston, and he was getting he's into straight edge before I was. I don't know if I was into straight edge, but I am straight edge. Like I never wore X's at shows or anything like that, but he was just like super into it. I think it got him through high school in a way of like just being like, fuck you. But to like, like the Minor Threat song, right? Just like, I don't need that shit. But so he went to Boston, which was like, he was discovering SSD and all that kind of stuff. So he's like, let's do a zine. Let's call it Boiling Point. And I'm like, sure. And I'm like the artsy kid who just wants to like lay shit out. I was already taking silkscreen classes to make t-shirts and, making flyers and whatever I could do artistically to like be part of the whole scene. So that just seemed like such a no-brainer, right? So, and we all went to the same shows, even though he was in Boston and I was in Pennsylvania. We'd go to a lot of the same shows on the weekends because back then a 2-hour car ride to see your favorite band was like nothing, right? So yeah, we like, I think a month or so after deciding to do it, we went to a show at the Anthrax armed with our little cassette recorder and our cameras, interviewed Siv and Lukey Luke from Gorilla Biscuits. And I think we did side by side. We did 2 interviews at that, and just took pictures. I had like a homemade dark room. Like, so it was like all the things I was into: photography, design, hardcore music. It all sort of made sense to put my focus there. And Dennis was a really good interviewer, but he was a little bit shy. So, Tom Rock was the other guy who was sort of, good at almost like meeting people. So like the 3 of us were like a good sort of triumvirate to like go do this thing. And it takes a lot to do this, right? All the record reviews, all the layouts, back then the transcribing was manual, right? And like you type it up on a word processor, do cut and paste. Like it's very labor intensive. So, it definitely took the 3 of us to get it rolling. And then I sort of became the layout guy.
Did you ever interview bands?
Yeah, I was there for the Youth of Today. I was there for like half of them. Trying to remember like which ones we did. Like I was there for the Gorilla Biscuits. We did Gorilla Biscuits twice because we didn't realize Walter was like the mastermind behind everything. So we interviewed Siv and Luke, not knowing we were not interviewing the guy who wrote the music or the words. So,
That's happened to me on this show. I'll be talking to someone and then midway through I'll realize they're in another band and I'm like, and then I have to like switch gears on the spot.
Yeah.
It's hard to keep track of everybody.
Yeah. So it's funny because the interviewing, basically we wanted it to be good content. We didn't want it to be like, so how cool is straight edge? Like we wanted to, as deep as we could be as like late teens, early 20s guys. We didn't want to just be hero worshiping, right? We wanted to ask, like when we interviewed Judge, we asked him about violence, right? Because it's like that band seems to promote violence. When we interviewed Fugazi, we tried to ask really intelligent questions, mostly because we were scared to piss off Ian, right? But,
right.
Like I don't want to, and we weren't going to ask him like 10 minor threat questions, even though that's all he really wanted to do at the time. But I was into like getting the content. I'm still this way, getting the content, and then just like, okay, what are the cool quotes? What are the, how can we, you don't know what the photographs look like until you develop them, right? And then you go, oh, fuck, this photograph, this corner of it's cool. Like I'm going to zoom into that and blow it up. And so it taught me a lot about editing and layout and sort of doing, figuring out what you can do with the constraints that you have, right? Like Xerox copies and, word processing and press type and, that kind of thing.
Yeah, that's my favorite part too. Talking to people has been varying degrees of difficult for me always, but getting the stuff and then taking it back to the lab and playing with it and pulling quotes or making reels or, that I like that. That's okay. That's fun. Unless I'm like really busy and don't have time to do it. But otherwise it's pretty fun.
Yeah, for sure.
How many issues did you end up doing?
We did 1, 2, we did 2.5, 3, 4, and 5. 5 I had nothing to do with. I had a lot to do with 1, 2, 2.5, and 3. And then I started being in bands. And we straggled. There's still like an unpublished Burn interview and Quicksand interview that someday I'll publish.
Yeah, we got to see that.
I even laid them out, right? I just never got around. Because then I'm like, I don't know, I went from, No Escape right into Deadguy, and like every waking moment went into working on my band stuff, right?
Yeah, No Escape into Deadguy into Kiss It Goodbye was like a super quick, what was it? 7 years or something?
Maybe less. Yeah, maybe 6, maybe 5 or 6. Yeah.
I remember you saying last time it was just like It all happened super fast.
Yeah. I mean, there's like overlap, right? Like there literally was overlap each time. It was like I was in Deadguy when the No Escape CD came out because we recorded it like posthumously. And that's when I had transferred to Rutgers and ran and met Dave and all that kind of stuff. And then like, Kiss Goodbye started before I moved to Seattle. And so I was still living where I was living. I could hear Deadguy practice in the basement without me. And I would go to Williamsburg and practice with Kiss Goodbye. So there's like total overlap.
Now, hold on a second. You could hear Deadguy practicing without you. Did you still live with some of the old bandmates or something? What was the deal?
So it was like this sort of 4-unit apartment place, off campus. And we used to practice in that basement. And I lived directly above Dave, and I think Crispy lived there. And in that basement, we practiced. And so when I guess I quit, I sort of announced that I was moving, which is the same as quitting. I didn't even know if they were going to go on without me or not, right? And I'd already sort of formed Kiss Goodbye and started practicing, like I said, in Williamsburg with Andrew and Tom and Keith and Coop. But I found out that they were still working on it because I heard them practice one day. It's so weird it was definitely surreal to hear that and be like, that's not what I'm doing. Right.
Did you hear did you hear a Fixation song or like a song you did and then someone else singing it?
Yeah. And I knew it was Tim. I knew enough to know that they were going to press on, but it was like, it didn't really occur to me until I heard it through the basement. Then I was like, oh yeah. I don't even know if those guys know that story. That's funny.
That is funny. No Escape. I'm curious about this band. Now, I tend not to check out older hardcore bands like before where I came in, right? Because I don't know. I just always imagine they're going to, I'm not the biggest fan of Youth Crew sounding stuff like that whole style. Right. So I sometimes hesitate to check out older bands because I'm like, oh no, is it going to sound like some Youth Crew thing, which I'm not really into, but no Escape doesn't sound like that at all. It I don't know. It's just different. It's got like enough of an edge, or I don't know. Right. I don't know if I want to call it metallic or what, but and then your vocals.
I mean, he was into the guitar. It was like I've always been with guitar players that want to rip off metal, like Slayer and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I need that edge to
metal,
it.
Right? Yeah, there's definitely more metal edge. And it's funny because I grew up decidedly not metal, unless you count Sabbath and Zeppelin and that kind of stuff, and Judas Priest, like up to a point. But I was never into like the Motley Crues, that kind of stuff. I was never into the hair metal, and then I wasn't there for the beginning of like Metallica and Slayer and stuff. I later became a fan. So my thing was like, okay, they can do all the metal sounding shit they want, and I'm going to still like do my thing over it, not try to be a metal guy. And I always thought that sort of worked, right? I thought that was a cool sort of chemistry.
Oh, it works.
Yeah. Well, thanks. So I thought, it's funny because No Escape, it's like, yeah, we deliberately were like, we know how to write mosh parts and Youth Crew shit, and we're not going to do that. We're not interested. I was in the epicenter of that, right? I was there for the emergence of Youth of Today and Gorilla Biscuits, and they're friends of mine. And I was like, and then Judge and all that other stuff. And it was really exciting until I saw every other band forming in the tri-state area sounding like a bad version of one of those bands. And I got bored pretty quickly. Like I had no interest in seeing this become some sort of genre or a copy of a copy of a copy. Because go back to the shows I used to go to as a kid or see flyers for these bands, like Social Distortion doesn't sound like Black Flag, doesn't sound like Dead Kennedys, doesn't sound like Circle Jerks, which doesn't sound like DOA, which doesn't sound like Big Boys. Like, it's like things were way more interesting. It wasn't all this homogenized, like, here's Youth of Today and Youth of Today Junior, and then Youth of Today Junior opening up for them. Like, I don't need that, right? Like, it's not interesting to me. Youth of Today was interesting because I saw them open for Reagan Youth, and that was like a striking difference in a really cool way, right? Like, that to me is interesting.
Yes, I'm with you. Once something emerges, you see things emerge all the time, and it's like, okay, but once we get down to like the second or third copy, I'm like, there's no need for this anymore. I'm checking out. And for stuff I do personally, yeah, I don't want to. I like to try to do something different to a degree. It's not like I'm sitting down writing saying, okay, it's time to make something really different, but I also don't want to put myself in a box. Like it's not going to be just a youth crew thing or just a straight metallic hardcore thing. I don't know. I don't want to limit myself to just one thing.
Yeah, no, I hear that. I mean, and Deadguy represented that to me.
So you were thinking of that with No Escape too? I was curious about the ethos and like what you wanted to do, because I know Deadguy was a response to different things that were going on at the time musically, saying, you know, we're not going to do this or we're going to do this differently. So No Escape was kind of the same idea.
Deadguy was an even angrier, more jaded, sharp response to the scene just getting worse and worse, in my opinion. And No Escape had the right idea. And the guitar player, who's a great friend of mine, Steve-O, will tell you this. Like he got sort of infected by like, hey man, if Tim sang more like a grunge guy and we sort of rocked out more, you know, we could be huge. Like they got stars in their eyes. They really wanted Lane Staley singing for No Escape, you know? And so that just became a crossroads. I was like, this is not why I got into this shit. This is not who I'm, you know, the way I'm writing for the kid that's in his room and wants to punch the walls and doesn't know why. Right. Like we're like a nervous breakdown personified or what, you know, like that's just what drives me. I know what I'm good at. I know what comes out of me honestly. Right. And so Deadguy was like the perfect opportunity to be like, leave all that behind. And from day one, and it's good to have one band under your belt and sort of know what all the moving parts are like and like what it is to write a song and write music with other people. So I think we all came from that to a degree, and we were just sort of all. I think we were just like, fuck it, right? We just want to write what we want to hear, and we're hearing cool shit from other places, and we're just going to rip that off instead. We're not inventing the guitar or the, you know what I mean? Like it's just, but we're just going to pull from way cooler places and really, and do our thing and be like, this is, and you know, we'd be writing this stuff and it doesn't sound like anything we'd ever heard. So we're like, I think it doesn't suck. Like, I don't know. Maybe it sucks. And then we'd play and people would just stand there and sort of nod knowingly. And we'd be like, do they like us? I don't know. Right. Like, and then they'd buy all of our shirts and we'd be like, I guess they like us because they bought all the shirts. Right. So that was like the barometer.
Yeah. I remember you mentioning that people were always into the merch, right? I think that speaks to your design skills. I always like, the shirt designs, the album covers, I like the aesthetic. It's kind of like this eerie look or parody of like working business stuff. I like all that.
Right. It's like repackaging of how America has been sort of packaged for us to consume is somewhat where I'm coming from. I kind of try to just go with it instinctively and not over analyze myself when I'm doing it. You know what I mean? Because that can get almost exhausting. You just want to sort of see what happens sometimes. It's one of those things. I'd be a terrible teacher because I'm like, I don't have a process. I just, you know, and it might happen at 2 a.m. It might happen at lunch. Like, you know what I mean? Like that something hits me or, you know.
Yeah, I know what you mean. For certain things, I can play guitar. I couldn't teach though. I don't know the name of one chord. I know open E or open C, depending on what tuning you're. I don't know C or I don't know. I know how to hold the strings to make the sounds I like. That's it.
Yeah, I know. And I like to stay that simple. Like I could easily, you know, study a little bit more and be a bit more learned, but I feel like part of the charm I can bring to this is like every new Deadguy song is a math problem where I'm trying to figure out where the fuck I fit in there. But I'm not going, this is a 7/4. Yeah. And I'm going to try to, you know, I'm just not doing that. I'm just like, to me, I'm like, I get the songs in my head until it's muscle memory. And then I will just riff over it. Right. And then every once in a while, something will fit nicely, and I'll be like, okay, I'll try to lock into that. And sometimes I don't even do a good job of locking into that, and I land on something better. Like, so it's a process that would not work for a lot of people. Like, it's funny because I've been in the studio with different musicians, and sometimes I have to prepare them for the way I go about my writing.
Yeah, it can be based on what I remember you telling me, it can be pretty free form, right? You'll just, whatever comes out, and you'll do different songs, multiple takes in different ways, and piece together what works.
Yeah, and part of that is, especially with Deadguy, with this new album, like these songs were pretty fresh when we recorded them. Like I didn't have a ton of time with them at practice, which is the natural place to sort of fuck around, do a really bad recording, on a boombox back in the day or on your iPhone now, and sort of hear where your vocals landed and kind of go, oh, that I like that. There wasn't a lot of that. Maybe 4 of the songs were written ahead of time, and then the other 7 are pretty damn new, where I had to like figure it out in the studio. So, I mean, that's another reason. But that's why it's kind of good that I'm comfortable with just going. Like I'm not self-conscious about it at all. If I fuck up, I fuck up. I don't care. And like working with Steve Evans is great because he kind of knows. He knows me. He knows us. He's the guy who recorded all the Deadguy stuff the first go around. So that was super helpful.
Did he record the LP or did he produce?
He recorded it. We went to his studio. He moved back to Jersey, which is pretty awesome for us. And he recorded it. I think he might have even picked up an instrument once or twice to kind of get something going because, we're 5 guys that live nowhere near each other. I mean, we live tri-state area near each other, except Keith's up in upstate. Keith's closer to Montreal than he is New York, honestly. But the rest of us are sort of New York adjacent, at least. Yeah, it would have been impossible without him to sort of be this guy that can kind of see the big picture of it all while we're all trying to find our way into the studio and figure shit out.
Yeah, I love that he was back involved with it. That's, he's done legendary stuff out in general and with you. So when did we decide that we're going to try to write new music? I remember the documentary. I remember you guys being together for the first time in a super long time and sitting there like trying to figure out songs. At what point in playing together again and being together again are we like, hey, let's give it a shot?
It was pretty quick. It was one of those things where it's like, we got back together, so to speak, for the documentary, and then COVID hits. And the whole time there was this Decibel show looming, and it kept getting pushed back 6 months. And we were just getting tight for that. We would practice a lot. We were tighter for that than we were ever for anything, honestly. Because as a bunch of 50-somethings or 40-somethings, it's like there's that extra thing of like, if you have a bad show, now it's going to be because you came out of the fucking woodwork 25 years later and you don't have it, right? So my thing was like, fuck that. I'm going to be in killer shape. My voice is going to be in killer shape. We're going to practice a lot. And pretty soon though, I mean, Crispy, I think from day one was like, I'll do this if we write 2 new songs, right? And that's always been my mindset with I went through that with No Escape. We were like we were practicing together to play a show for something. And I was like, if we practice, we're writing songs just because like, that's my favorite part. I'm like, and it'll take us half an hour, maybe an hour to go through the songs we know. And then now we're here and we're not fucking dead. Like, let's see what happens. Like, what's the worst that could happen? Right. So, and Dave, between the times I knew him, like between the time I left and the time I came back, basically, he had learned how to play guitar and had written a shit ton of stuff. It was all on SoundCloud. He was still living in Amsterdam when we first got back together. And he just shared a bunch of tunes with me. And I'm like, a couple of them, I'm like, these sound like fucking Deadguy songs. Right. So that got me stoked, because I was like, I still feel like we can do this. I feel like people, obviously, we're credited with starting all sorts of shit, but I still feel like no one really sounds like us. You know what I mean? Sometimes I'm surprised that it'll be like, this band exists because of Deadguy. And I'm like, but I don't think they really sound like us. Right. And maybe that's a good thing. They're more inspired by the fact that we were just nihilistic and, boundary pushing or whatever. But I don't know. So, but I think we're all sort of pleasantly surprised that it came out pretty well, and it's being really well received, but pretty quickly we were doing we already played a couple of these new songs here and there in the last year or so, just to see, because we did want to see okay, let's see how these feel live, right? If these fit into our set, which is all Fixation mostly, and it doesn't seem like some odd clunker, like here's the new song that we're going to make you suffer through. You know what I mean? And I've been there watching bands I love play their new shit and kind of going, okay, cool. Or get to the other shit. Cause I just, you know what I mean? I watched you jerk off for 3 minutes on whatever you're into now. I think we avoided that trap.
Yeah. I love the 2 new singles. It sounds like you guys never went away, and I'm definitely excited to hear the rest of the record. How did you write? Were you guys ever all together just busting stuff out? Do you trade files? How do you do it?
It was a lot of in the songs we wrote together. It was the same with okay, we have a part, and Keith come back with another part to put on top of that, or Keith will come up with a part. It was the same as before, or someone will come up with the first 80% of a song, and then we'll either sort of grab something that didn't go anywhere and put it on there, or someone will have a riff that they were fucking around with. There was a little bit of almost shyness in the beginning, especially from Keith, who just felt like he hadn't really written in a long time. And he had to sort of get over that rust of not just playing raw parts for people. But then he got over it, and it all sort of clicked. It just took a little bit longer. We've already been back together longer than we were around the first time, which is kind of crazy to think about. Now the process is, now with digital, we can really we all sort of do our homework. So if we know we're practicing and there's a couple of songs that are sort of in the works, we'll all make sure we do sort of our homework for that song. So when we get to practice, we either have a thought about what to do with it or whatever, right? And then we're pretty good about having the discipline to beat on a song for a good hour or two until we felt like it was in a good place, and then record it and then move on. Record it on an iPhone back, before we went. And then we did do some demo tracking at different studios, but that stuff sort of flopped. But then, connecting with Steve, it all sort of came into place. We had 11 songs to sort of work with. Dave is a huge driver of all this. And, he had to get through his drums. And once those were down, I feel like we felt like we put a stake in the ground. And now it's if something still needs a guitar part, we have time, we can figure it out. And I remember going in to do vocals for one song and hearing a Keith part at the end of the song going, holy fuck, so I feel like it is nice because we're all it's not our first rodeo, so we all can bring shit. Even some of Crispy's vocals on the first song, Kill Fee, I didn't hear until the very end. And I was like, holy fuck, it just took the song to a whole other level. So I feel like everybody sort of brought it. It's kind of cool.
I like that. Yeah, your voice has not, what's the word I'm looking for? Your voice has not wavered over the years. It still sounds very strong. It still sounds like you. Do you do anything to maintain that? Do you do warm-ups? How do you hold on to that?
No. What I try to do is I don't drink. I don't do any kind of drugs. I exercise like a fiend. I'm a vegan. I feel like I do all these things just to be able to be strong enough to do this kind of crazy music. So I feel like that's the thing, but I don't have this thing where I have a honey concoction. I'm in there just pouring honey down my throat sometimes, or Fisherman's Friend or whatever. And there's days in the studio where I was stronger than others, you know what I mean? And Steve is really good about knowing. He's like, you're going to get this many songs. With Fixation, I did that in one session, maybe, right? Maybe 2, the whole album. This one, it took me 10. I could do 2 songs and pretty much be we should stop so I can do 2 songs tomorrow if I come in tomorrow. And especially also we were still figuring them out a lot. Right. And he pushes me too. Like I'll do a take and I think it's good. And he's like, no, I think he can be stronger. Right. So he sort of pushed me to kind of find that again. And he played me vocals from Fixation that are isolated. So I could sort of hear, all right, we found the right mic. So I matched the tone, all that kind of stuff. We set the room up the right way, all that kind of stuff. And then somehow I just haven't lost it. I don't know why, but it's harder than it was, but it's still there.
Yeah, that gives me hope. I exercise, I run, I don't drink, I don't smoke. I'm not the healthiest eater in the world, but I'm not the worst either. So, yeah, hey, maybe that's all it takes. I hope.
Right. I know it's funny because Steve was telling me like the first time in the studio, I would just down Milk Duds all the time. And I was like, that's not an option now.
Isn't it? Yeah, this happened when I turned 40. I could not eat whatever I wanted anymore and then wake up feeling like a kid still. I remember I ate an ice cream bar at 10 p.m. and then I got up the next day and felt like shit. And I was like, oh no, it's over. Yeah. I'm old.
Yeah. I know. I'll definitely get like a junk food hangover if I eat shitty stuff at like a movie.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous. Yeah. I mean, it's just like, and I have friends my age who party and I don't know how you do it. I'm like, that's just, it sounds terrible to me. Whatever.
It does. I'm glad I don't do it anymore. And I did it for way too long, but, hey, it's not for me. It's not for me.
Exactly. Yeah. No, I mean, I got kids in their 20s. My daughter she can party till 2 a.m. and get up and do a 6 a.m. workout. Right. So.
Yeah. I used to wake up Friday, be awake till Monday, and then go into work. I was insane.
Yeah.
Would I do that now? Hell no. But
yeah,
I had my time. So you don't drink. Have you never drank? Like, has it never been for you?
No, I have drank. I drank in high school like every other typical kid. Spent most of my 20s and 30s, into my 30s, not drinking. Then, like when I sort of retired from hardcore, I started drinking a little bit of wine with my wife. My wife was never straight edge. The funny thing is she is now, just because I think we're older, we're just trying to stay fit and healthy and whatever. But no, I spent like some of my 40s being a drinker, trying to get into like whiskey or tequila or mezcal, and probably out of boredom, right? I wasn't doing music, and like the peers I had that were other parents from school all partied, right? But I don't know. I never got super into it. And then I was just like, I'm over it. And just stopped again. Just stopped. Didn't make a big thing about it. Didn't make an announcement. Didn't write an Instagram story about it or something. I just, you know what I mean? Like, I don't feel like it's that interesting at our age. Like if you have your shit together, you have your shit together.
It's not. It's interesting. It's always interesting to me because I had a problem and then stopped. And it was really hard to stop. And I'm still am involved in recovery. So it's always interesting to me, for me to hear about it. But to the general public, it's like, no one cares if you stopped or you started or whatever.
Yeah. And my thing is like, I'm not coming at it from like recovery.
Yeah.
Right? I was like a melodramatic, like, I'm like probably 86, 87. I would listen to like punk in my room. And if I was drinking, I might punch the wall, punch a hole. But I think it's also just a melodramatic teenager, right? Like, and alcohol lessens your inhibitions, whatever. But yeah, I mean, I didn't like stop 10 years ago or whatever it was because I was hiding my liquor or the first thing I thought about in the morning. It was just never that. It was just like, oh, bad habit. And I don't need, like, if I want to work out tomorrow, I'm not going to drink tonight. Like, and it's not worth it. Like, I don't get anything out of it. Like, I was like liking the taste of certain drinks, but not that much. Right. Like,
it just didn't become a real interest for you.
No, exactly. It wasn't serving me. So it was like, whatever.
The years you were distant from hardcore, were you done with it? Were you not into it anymore? Did you just not care?
That's fair. Yeah. It sounds callous, but it's like, it's not even like that I didn't care. I mean, like I said, it wasn't I didn't care. It was I was raising kids, right? Like I've been with my wife since before Boiling Point, right? So, um, and we decided to start a family. That was a big part of it. And so then my focus is, my first daughter and then my twins, a year and a half after that. And, you're not playing loud music in the house with like babies trying to sleep. So it was one of the, like this. So, and then I wasn't like, I'm going to raise my kids in Ramones t-shirts and give them mohawks and make them punk rockers like that. Just, I was like, I owe it to my kids for them to be raised by interesting people. I'm going to stay an interesting person who doesn't just go to work, come home, kick the dog, watch TV, repeat. You know what I mean? Like, I always felt compelled to keep them interested in things other than like the generic shit that school offers you or whatever. But, I was out of it. When I moved to Philly, I hooked up with the guys from All Else Fail. We were going to do like this sort of Deadguy cover thing where we were going to play Fixation from start to finish. And that was like the first or second year of like, this is hardcore, I think. And I practiced with them and it was cool. And then I was like, feels like karaoke. I'm not into it. And I just said, thanks. That was really fun. And I was sort of honored. And that was that. And then I hopped up on stage with Rorschach once during their first reunion and did a Black Flag song. And my kids got to see that when they were really little. And I thought that was cool for them to just sort of see this underground scene. Yeah. And then, but I still was like, just, I'd follow things a little bit, but not avidly. I wasn't going to shows because I just sort of fell out of that habit. Yeah. And it wasn't until I got sort of, I think I did some No Escape stuff and then I was doing Bitter Branches. So I did get sort of pulled back into things in like, I don't know, 2016, maybe I started doing more and more shit and sort of tiptoeing back into it, always thinking like, it'll just be a project thing. Like I did Process Black with Aaron Edge and I did a No Escape thing. And then I'm doing some Bitter Branches stuff, but never thought I'd be doing it full on the way we're doing Deadguy right now. And now I'm sort of catching up on the stuff I missed, like somewhere along the way, Converge became the world's biggest band, stuff like that.
Right. Are you happy to be back involved to the level that you are? Like for me, there was years where I was more involved. There was years where I was less involved. But once I quit drinking and everything else, I just had a lot more time. I'm not just going from bar to bar or being up all night or this endless pursuit of consumption. So I started creating again. This podcast came out of it, several bands, different things. So it's pretty much my life now. And that's the way it was when I was 18, before I got all messed up. So I just circled back around to where I was. Like, how was it for you?
It's been awesome, right? Because it's like you reconnect with, like, it's amazing how many people are still around. And those of us who are still around, I think we have an appreciation for it, right? Whereas like as kids, you sort of take it for granted and you scoff at the idea that a band in their 30s might exist or whatever. And now you're just like, well, what? Like, this is the fucking coolest thing you could possibly be doing, right? Like the fact that people go to our shows is mind blowing. The fact that there's a thriving scene and we can play with bands that are half our age is mind blowing and cool. And on the metal side of things too, the shows are incredible. And now it's like my kids can come to see our shows with their friends and it's all, I don't know. And I've like, when we played St. Vitus, like my daughter was talking to the dudes who like run the club and like learning their story and like he's the son of immigrants and like how he started this club. And like, there's all these things that are just so interesting about the scene that I think we sort of, I took for granted because it was just sort of handed. It was like there, right? But you look back and you're like, we put out records, we put on shows, we self-promoted, we made our own t-shirts, we like all this shit. Like, you're just like, how the fuck did we do all that? And it's fucking cool that we did, right? Because there's an actual legacy, right? There's a thing you can go back on. Like a lot of my peers that are not in the music scene, I don't know what they're going back and looking at. Like what? Like their high school yearbook? Like, what I mean? Like, it's like we can go back and be like, there's that show and that record and that, and it's all led to shit that's being appreciated today and taken further. Like, I feel like the scene it's delivering on a promise that we thought in our heads. It's the opposite of society where it's gotten more diverse and interesting and progressive. And, You know what I mean? It's funny because like Deadguy, we're a bunch of middle-aged white guys. Like that's almost like, I almost feel like we're lame for that. You know? But it's because there's so many cool bands and it's like, you don't even know what gender someone is or whatever. Like it's fucking great. You know what I mean? So I think I have this appreciation for it for what it was and how it's sort of cooler now than it was.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely gotten bigger. And has it gotten better? That's a good question. I don't know, but it's gotten bigger, but there's always new stuff that's good. Let me say that. There's always still, that's why I get annoyed when people are like, oh, there's nothing good anymore. Or, oh, where's the rock bands? And it's just like, bro, it's just not in the mainstream anymore. And it hasn't been for a while, but there's always good stuff out there, especially in the scene. I think there's consistently been good bands since I started listening to this stuff. Always.
No, that's an excellent point because like, if you're only looking at like the Foo Fighters, Red Hot Chili Peppers area of
Greta Van Fleet, rock, whatever.
Yeah, there's like very little, right? But if you look just below the radar, which is how we grew up too, the metal scene is thriving like it never has. The hardcore scene's exploding, all this stuff, and it's all right there, right? You just have to look for it just a little. It was harder to look for it before. I feel like there's so much more of it now, which means there's more shit, but there's a lot of good stuff out there too.
Exactly. That gig that Deadguy played in Brooklyn with Dillinger Escape Plan and Callous Dowboys. How was that? That venue is incredible. That must have been an amazing show.
Those are two amazing shows. And it's funny because my daughter lives in Brooklyn, my oldest daughter, and she found out we were playing that club and she's like, Charlie SCX just played there. And I had to be like, who's that? Right. And now I know who that is. I can't help it. But when she first said it to me, I was like, I think I've heard of that person. Like, those shows were incredible. And it's funny because like, Dillinger, I've known some of those guys forever. I finally met Dimitri.
Yeah, the singer. Dimitri. Yeah, people compared that very, very first Dillinger EP, the 5-song one, to Deadguy at the time.
Yeah, and I even remember when they were forming, because people were like, yeah, they're looking for singers, and someone mentioned me to someone. And I was very adamantly retired at that time, so I didn't even entertain the idea of looking into any of that stuff. And I don't even know how true it is, but that's when I first heard of them. But yeah, it's just cool because like they're huge, right? And it's like, and they sort of, Dimitri's meeting my daughter and he's like, your dad's a legend. And I'm like, shut the fuck up. Right. Like, but like, it was so, like, it's funny because like we got to play with Red Chord too. Like some of these bands, to me, they're like live bands. Like I love seeing them live more than I like listening to them on Spotify or whatever. Dillinger qualifies as that. Red Chord qualifies as that. Napalm Death, Converge. These are all bands I much more enjoy live than playing while I'm trying to work. Right.
Yeah.
So it's been pretty awesome to like play with these kind of bands. We're pretty fortunate in that regard. But yeah, those Paramount shows, like the club's just incredible. Like it's it's a little bit of a pinch me thing. Cause like Deadguy 1.0, I think we maybe played to 500 people once or twice. Like if we were lucky.
And the thing that blew my mind, which I learned when I talked to you last time, you were out of the band before Fixation even came out.
Exactly.
So to go from whatever shows you were playing at the time to Brooklyn Paramount, which is like this majestic theater, and then you go in the green room and they have all the plaques for all the artists who sold the place out, and you'll see like Ella Fitzgerald and then like Refused and then Poison the Well. It's a trip.
It's nuts, right? Yeah. And to be lucky enough to be asked to play a show with a band that sells it out, right? And their crowd knows us and appreciates us and goes appropriately apeshit. It's pretty fucking cool. It took me a while to feel, I feel like we were comfortable. Like it was funny because like the first show back was like this, at the Fillmore here to like 3,000 plus people or whatever, which is a weird way to come back from being an obscure band. And we were surprisingly comfortable up there. I think because we were super tight, like we had practiced our asses off. But I am slowly getting more comfortable with those bigger stages. But it helps seeing bands like Napalm or Converge or Dillinger who are of our ilk and how they approach it, right? yeah, because for me, like, this is Deadguy is not my day job, right? Like we play so many bands where it's like it's their day job. This is not my day job. So, like I'm
Right.
going there. I'm learning on the fly every time we do stuff.
Well, the new album is coming, and it is called Near Death Travel Services. Is there an overall theme to the record? Like, will you lock in on a theme for the whole record, or do you take it song by song, or what's your process for the new LP?
There's only a theme in that those 11 songs lyrically were written in the last 2 years, right? So think about the general zeitgeist. If you're, like we talked about earlier, an empathetic, caring, socially conscious human being in America in 2023, 24, 25, that can't help but creep in, right? But it's the same. It's how I felt, from day one doing music, is like the politics of the world have always sort of informed and to me, the politics too is like being plugged into the capitalist machine, right? Which, because like crispy jokes that we just complain about work all the time. That's what we're known for. But to me, that's part of it. That's a political part of it. Being told, to me, work ethic's all about have work ethic, because it costs nothing for someone to tell you to feel good about working hard for somebody else, right? To me, it's a scam, right? So anyway, so the new record, yeah, it's I think it's the same way I just try to like latch on. If I have an idea and it comes from a conversation, it comes from a piece of news, it comes from an experience. And when I'm in writing mode, I'll make a point of okay, that's an idea, right? Like, like the Kill Fee was written the day after the election, and it's basically like, we are the freaks and we dare to believe that someday, like I'm sort of a strange optimist in that I feel like someday we're going to win. I'm beating my head against the wall. Someday empathy is going to win, right? Or whatever it is. And so I just wrote a song about that real quick. And that song, I wrote that in 10 minutes, right? Those lyrics. And a lot of this too is through a lens of like, I think about, like, it's more as like a father of people who are my age when I started writing these kind of lyrics in the first place, and what that lens is about, and what like we're sort of leaving on their plate a little bit. That kind of creeps into my head and informs things. The title Near Death Travel Experiences is like everything Deadguy. It's a little bit of an inside joke where, Dave, who books all of our tours and stuff, jokes that like this is his travel agency, Near Death Travel Services, because we're basically like, we'll do anything because we could all be dead next year, right? Like, like we're that age where it's like, so these are near death travel services. Like that's sort of, and it's sort of like, I was like, okay, visually as an artist, as a designer, I'm like, that's a really fun thing to lock into, as far as like, the idea of like this sort of dystopian bus stop in the middle of nowhere and it's the end of the world kind of shit. And doing it in Photoshop and stuff is just sort of my jam.
Yeah. The cover was very striking. I dig it.
Thanks. And it's funny because I also did this cover. The cover is almost deliberately a little bit like this quiet narrative, because I almost wanted to have people be like, oh no, did Deadguy do some sort of artsy, like prog rock thing? Is this going to sound like Pink Floyd or something, right? And the booklet on the inside is properly crazy. Like, every song has got its own sort of theme going on, because I really dig like doing, a page for each song. I just feel like I don't know why that's just not a normal thing.
Yeah, I like that. I want that for what I'm working on now. I want a page per song. I want the lyrics there. I want a specific picture for each song. Right. We need to bring back the narrative. We have to.
Exactly. Yeah. I don't know. I get bummed if like you open up a package, especially now, because it's all about the packaging, because nobody really needs the vinyl, right? I mean, some people do, I guess, if they've got the killer stereo system. But I'm like, my thing is like, I always want that thing. And I think because I grew up on like Dead Kennedys records and stuff like that, where there was just cool shit inside, and you just wanted to take it and look at it and read the lyrics. And wonder what the fuck's going on with some of these images or whatever. Like, I just like that shit, right? Like, it's another layer that you can put on things. That's just cool.
So the future of Deadguy, what do you want to do? Would you go on a week tour, a month tour? Would you do anything extended? Like, what do you want to do?
Personally, I mean, I could do a month-long tour. My kids are out of the house. My wife supports this. Like, she loves it. That's me personally. That's not in the cards for Keith Huckins. I think the most we could do probably, it's probably like a good 10-day swing here, maybe 2 weeks if it was like the right kind of thing. Fests seem to be a bigger thing now. Like, the way I think it works nowadays is like the fest will get you to go somewhere like overseas, wherever it is. And that sort of like is a guaranteed big audience, and you make some money on merch, and that will buoy you if you want to go to some of the smaller clubs that may or may not have a good promotion, or may or may not have people show up on a Wednesday, whatever it is. Right. As long as the planes can keep flying, who the fuck knows?
That's not even a guarantee anymore.
Yeah, we're not, but I can tell you, I don't see us getting in a van and driving across America anytime soon or ever. I think
that didn't work out so good the last time you guys did that.
Us up, first of all. But I mean, up and down either coast. I mean, we would do shows depending on the show. I mean, I'm up for anything. Like, me and Dave are essentially up for anything. And then schedules permitting, the other guys are too. It's just, it boils down to scheduling and all that kind of stuff.
How about Bitter Branches?
Believe it or not, I just finished recording 13 songs for the new LP.
Ooh.
And so that's about to get mixed by Jay Robbins, I think in like a week or two.
Nice.
Yeah. So that'll come out in like the fall. I just consider that my true project band. We sound like a really angry shellac or something.
Yes. That's why I like it.
No, Dan Yeaman does some vocals with me on this, so that's kind of fun. Yeah, so to me, I'm like, it's a really cool project. My head would explode if I had to try to figure out how to play shows with them and Deadguy, because that's 24 new songs in the last year and a half that I would be trying to like wrap my head around.
Right.
So unless Deadguy decided we're going to take 6 months off or something. Bitter Branches will just, especially, and Dan's super busy with 8 million projects too. So it's like, I wouldn't be surprised if we play a show or two here or there. But I'm really proud of this like new record that's going to come out. Like, the sounds on it are fucking great. Like, it's so not Deadguy. It's just that other part of the world that I love too musically. That whole like sort of. Yeah,
I love that angular kind of DC, somewhat influenced post-hardcore, and then there's like some heavier moments in there too. I mean, I'm into that sound. I dig that.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because on the text thread, I was like, it sounds like Shellac and Rites of Spring got into a fight in a dark alley.
That's a great description.
Like it's sort of like that for me, right? And that is so not Deadguy, which is kind of cool. For someone who sings like me to have two very different avenues like that is kind of fun.
Yeah, and for it to still work so well.
Yeah, appreciate that.
Yes, of course. Well, everybody, Near Death Travel Services, the new LP from Deadguy is out June 27th. So we all want to listen to that, right, Tim? And we want to buy the vinyl. If we still buy vinyl, sure. Let's do it. I mean, come on, what are we doing?
Also, the booklet is fucking, it's cool. Yeah, it's worth it. I try to make it worth it.
I really want to see it now, and I will. But Tim, listen, it's always a pleasure to have you on here. Come back anytime. I'm looking forward to hearing all the new music, and thank you.
Sure thing, man. Appreciate it.
All right, we are here now with Dave Rosenberg. Dave, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. Pleasure to be here.
Yes, Dave, it's great to have you here. There's a lot going on in the world of Deadguy. We've got Near Death Travel Services, the first LP in a very, very long time, coming out soon. And I just talked to Tim earlier this week, so it's It's great to get to know the band better and find out all of this stuff. And we're going to find out even more. But Dave, first I want to ask you, how are you doing today?
Fantastic. It's raining here in New York, which is like a bit of a drag, as you know. We'd had good weather. And, as you get old, you realize how much the weather matters to you. You know what I mean? I used to think, like, who cares? Now I'm like, oh, no more rain. I can't handle it. I'm like that bumblebee in that terrible video. Was it Blind Melon? Remember that? It was no more rain. Yeah. That's me.
I check the weather all week, highs, lows. I go outside to see how cold it is before I actually go outside. It's a whole thing.
Yeah, I lived in Amsterdam for a few years, and the weather was always terrible, except for like a month a year. And but you'd have to measure it by like in minute increments. Like I got like between 6:14 and 6:25 to run to the store, because otherwise it's just going to be pissing rain again, and the depression will kick right back in. You
lived in Amsterdam for how long?
3 years.
Why? What were you doing there?
I think that's a good question that there's no good answer. I worked, I got a job for a company that was based more in Germany, but they headquartered in Amsterdam for tax purposes. And so I had a kid who was relatively young. We had a dog. We had a house in San Francisco at the time, but sort of like opportunistically, it was, we could make the move. And my wife and kid wanted to go, and I had a job. And then it's like Amsterdam's a weird place. I will tell you the job sucked. So let me start with that. Amsterdam's a weird place, man, because like it is epically beautiful, but they're not a warm people.
Really?
So, terribly brutal. Yeah, very difficult. So my only friends after all those years were like, people I worked with, I didn't like the job. My friends were either at the gym, most of whom were expats, or like, the random guy at the music store. Like I had no one to rock with. I used to go and sit. There was a rehearsal studio. It was like $5 an hour. And I would just play by myself for hours on end. No one wanted to rock. It was a very strange existence. With the exception of the fact of like, we lived on a canal, awesome view. You can go out, like a lot of stuff about Amsterdam was great. The social services are fantastic for people who need them, that kind of thing. Food, you burn it out pretty quick, but it's like, it was an interesting experiment.
I see. I would have imagined that the people would be more open and kind or something compared to here, but I guess not.
Oh, heavens, no, absolutely not. Yeah, almost the opposite in a weird way. Having grown up in New Jersey, like I know people are jerks, and the Dutch love to tell you how like they're very straightforward. I'm like, no, you're just a jerk. Like, have you ever been to Boston? They're the most obnoxious in the universe.
Where in Jersey did you grow up?
Central Union County.
Okay. Yeah, I grew up in Bucks County, Pennsylvania. So, not too far now that we look at it, but it seemed like a lifetime away when I was a kid,
Very true. Yeah.
I remember driving up to North Jersey a couple of times for shows, and it just seemed like forever.
Forever and a day. Yeah. I mean, we all went to college together, minus Keith, who lived up a little bit further north, like in Bergen County. So we all lived in New Brunswick, but we all kind of grew up various areas. And like, man, I tell you, what's funny about it now is I'm old. I can't do those drives anymore. Like it broke me. Like going on tour like that for all those years, like I cannot do it. Like I can drive 2 hours tops, and I'm nuts if I have to go past that. And when we lived in Europe, we did one big road trip, like from Amsterdam all the way down to Italy and like back up. And I grinded it out like I was on tour. And that's it. It's like the last time I don't have a car. You know what I mean? Like people I work with are like, you take public transportation. I'm like, listen, don't make me explain driving 50 hours or like 6 hours to play for 40 minutes to 30 people and then driving 6 hours back. Like that was my life for multiple years. I don't have it in me anymore.
Yeah, that's I don't mind driving, but then again, I haven't done it as much as you. I've been on some tours. I don't mind driving 2 hours, 3 hours, maybe even 4. I hate airports. Now I've flown a ton. I had a job where I traveled constantly, and just flying constantly in airports, I still don't like it.
Still don't like it. I fly all the time. I've been 1K for 10-14 years.
Yeah.
So I'm used to it. So I kind of accept it. But now you get upgrades and whatever else. But yeah, it's all look, these are, as they say, first world problems. So we will not belabor it too much, except for to say that we are heroes, you and I. and
Yes, we
everybody
are.
else sucks. Yeah. So
That I can agree with. Yes. What do you do for your career?
I work in software.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Development?
not anymore. I used to. Now I'm like an executive, for lack of a better term.
Nice. Okay.
Yeah.
So you grew up in Union County. Tell me about your intro to hardcore punk, that whole world of music. When did you get into it? What bands grabbed you? Tell us about that.
Yeah, I mean, started for me, the punk side of it probably started with the Misfits. I mean, Jersey Pride, of course. We had Vintage Vinyl, the record store in Ford. Which, I eventually, as in college, I worked at Vintage Vinyl for several years, so it was a great thing. But Kiss for me was number one. Like when I was a kid, Kiss, AC/DC, and then into Maiden, and then I think somewhere down the line I discovered Minor Threat. And that kind of started it. And then the Misfits were really like, first of all, just the imagery was awesome. And like, I had to have that record, the Crimson Ghost. And I remember even buying like it must've been Die My Darling, and thinking this must be at the wrong speed. They're playing too fast. Whenever that was, I mean, I was maybe like 10 or something. But I think as a drummer, so I started playing young, and I was aggressive about playing the drums. And my father was a big band kind of guy. So big Gene Krupa, Buddy Rich. So I kind of like had a sense of that to progress, you need to play harder music. And that's typically where people got into metal, like got into Rush because it was harder to play, or Maiden, stuff like that. But it's such a difference and you start to hear these hardcore bands are like, the energy is kind of different, and I don't know, better. It's maybe the wrong way to say it, but different. But the musicianship, not always the greatest. So, it was kind of a different thing. And just, I think my first time I went to CB's, and it was probably ninth grade. So maybe 1986, saw Murphy's Law and Token Entry, and another band called Six and Violence, if you remember them, which was like a properly crazy thing. That was what Murphy's Law was, sprayed in the beer ball. So, you didn't need that when you were 14 trying to explain that to your mother why you smelled like beer coming home from New York, but that was a whole other story. So, but there was a couple, I'd go to Vintage to go buy records, and you'd start to see new stuff, right? So I would occasionally just take a flyer. And then there was a couple of kids that I sort of, in the mostly skateboarding back then was more punk rock than it was like now, where it's a lot of hip hop. And so we'd meet various people out skating or whatever else. And, you learn about Black Flag or whatever it may be. And that was kind of the I guess the introduction. And then I had a good friend of mine in high school who was like obsessed with like Exploited and Sex Pistols and all those kinds of things, like the more punky rocky side of it. But I think once you went to a CB's matinee, it was like this indoctrination into a whole other world. And then, every Sunday for however long that was, we would go to CB's. It almost didn't matter who was playing, but you would go. I also remember seeing, can't figure out the year of this, but I was probably younger than that. I was probably like 12, maybe 13. Now it's probably like, we came into the city to go skateboarding, whatever, skating somewhere. And then we went over to the CB's record store, and Agnostic Front happened to be playing. So I was like, of course we're going to go in and see Agnostic Front. I'd never been so scared in my life at that point. It's like everyone was a giant. They were ultra violent. It was like terrifying and yet weirdly safe. That was what was always fascinating about it. As I look at it now, it was like, people didn't really get hurt, nothing like that. There wasn't fights, it was always like it was such a weird thing to be a part of. And so that was probably, I don't know, maybe 8th or 9th grade, something like that in Jersey. And then in high school, just kind of, whatever, expanded on that a little bit. And then time we got to college, there was a lot. I mean, at Rutgers in particular, there was a lot of music. My sister went to Rutgers also, so she's 4 years older. And so I would come down and like go see, like, there was like a whole scene of weird, like, I don't even know, folky, punky bands like the Wooden Soldiers and Spiral Jetties and all these things that I'm sure nobody ever heard of. And then when we met other people, right at that point, I had a good friend who was like super into ska of all things, but he'd go to City Gardens every week, and he had a car. And so every week, my freshman year, every weekend, we'd go to City Gardens. Didn't matter who was playing. I saw these ska bands that I still, for the life of me, I still can't figure out why I went along. But we'd go see Rollins or Ween or whoever. We saw Nirvana, that kind of thing at City Gardens, because Lunachicks, I actually became friendly with one of the Lunachicks guitar players recently. And so, it's just that immersion in it. And I started playing in various other bands. I mean, I started out as a music major, if you can believe that, and made no sense for what the music I was starting to play. But I had this kind of sense that like, well, can you play this better? That was sort of like when we started Deadguy. It was a little bit like I had been playing in a couple of bands. One that was like my roommate needed somebody to fill in like a weird heavy industrial band. And then I joined this other friend of ours who it was almost like heavy yes is the best thing I can come up with. It was like, but it was that time of like Jane's Addiction-y, sort of proggy, whatever. And it was hard to play, right? So it was kind of like interesting in that regard. And so when we started the band, me and Crispy were like playing in our basement. We were roommates. We have this whole house of lunatics. And we just sort of said, well, like, can we make it more interesting? Like, can we make heavy music kind of, I wouldn't say more musical, but, can we make something different out of it than what everybody else is doing, which at the time was like, there's a lot of like bands like Mouthpiece and those kinds of things were pretty straight ahead in whatever it's there. It's all, whatever you're on is your path.
Was it like the big three too, like Earth Crisis, Strife, Snapcase, all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, definitely those guys. But then there was bands that were starting to come like Grief. Remember them? Like very slow and heavy. Ink and Dagger, which you did the interview with Don, who like we knew Sean when we from Crud, because me and Crispy played in another band, and we used to see Sean McCabe all the time and see Don. And if I can tell you a great Ink and Dagger story.
Oh, please. They're like my favorite band.
Oh, dude, they were the best. Honestly, that was the first time as an adult I was like, cannot believe this dude is gone. As a side note, we were in Salt Lake City, Utah, playing at this giant church something or other. It's us. I can't remember who else was, but Ink and Dagger. And we were debating who should play first because we all kind of wanted to leave. This was like those kids. They were straight edge kids. They had like Mormons, but they had like 3 X's tattooed on their throats. This was the 90s. You know what I mean? Like I was thinking, where are they now? Probably changing tires. And man, those guys, because they were face painted up and these kids hated them because they were like evil. Of course, by the way, we show up with pentagram t-shirts, like just the pentagram.
Yeah.
We were not beloved. And Sean, to his credit, relentless, would not stop just fucking needling these guys. And they're just, and he was like such a smart lunatic, and him and Don are just tormenting these dudes to the point where they actually had to stop playing. We had to grab our shit and run out of there. And like these huge pickup trucks come up and they're blocking our way out. Like basically we're going to beat you guys up. And, some dude from the venue was finally like, what the hell are you guys doing? And we all just basically, whoop, we drove away under cover of night. And this was like, funny thing is like, it was like 5 p.m. It was broad daylight, and they're still face painting. And then we stopped for like a taco, and these guys were all still wearing the makeup, and like it was proper insanity with them at all times. So it was great.
Oh, I love that. Yeah. Wait, you said it was in Salt Lake?
Salt Lake, yeah.
Yeah, there was like a big problem with straight edge there, wasn't it? Like just insane violence, or I remember it being like a thing. Oh no, we're going to Salt Lake. Like, be careful.
We were too stupid to know that. Just as a side note, we would just be like, yeah, we're going to play. And the funny thing is, like, we were like, oh, this is great. We're with these dudes who we know, because we used to play with them in Philly and everything else. So like we were friends, and it was like, I would say that was pretty close to a riot. For which would have been a whole other experience, you know what I mean? But we bailed out of there, and it was such a surreal thing. And I actually sort of forgot about that until just now. So these are the things that we missed.
Yeah, I always love a good Ink and Dagger story. I'm a fiend for them, but
yeah, they were very unique, like a pretty special thing, and they were, I think, also early guys who had their own sound, like, which is what our thing was. Like, how do we find our own sound? And they did it. And Don like a bit of a savant on the guitar. Like he had that almost like Johnny Marr sort of vibe to it, playing heavy music, which is like, it was it's pretty hard to come by, man. It was a very interesting band, and I feel like it never really got its due.
Definitely not. And still no one sounds like them. And I would put Deadguy in that category too, where it's just like Deadguy, and then everyone else who sounds like Deadguy. So when you're initially putting it together with Chris P,
Yep.
yeah, like what do you have specific influences, or what's the method to think like, or what's the method to do something different?
Well, I mean, some of it is thoughtfulness, right? Of like how can I make this different? Some of it, I think, when we first started, Crispy was a bass player, and the royal we decided he'd play guitar, and we taught Pops how to play bass. But really, it was like we were sort of like we were listening to a lot of stuff, and I think early on, and we've never shied away from like Today's the Day and the Unsane, obviously the Black Flag, Slayer, all that kind of stuff. I think a little bit more obvious at that time. But when we did this new record, so I ended up writing, I think like maybe 10 of the 11 songs on guitar, and I demos and everything else. And it's not a brag necessarily. It's more just that like it was it. So I ended up having, to some extent or another, I had a little bit more time. I think just more focus on writing songs. I started playing guitar maybe 10-ish years ago, maybe a little bit more than that. And when we thought, well, hey, we want to go make a record, it was tough, man. It's tough for everybody to get the time and whatever else. And because I work from home, I would like literally like just pick up a guitar and just be like, all right, I'm going to go try to see what happened. And what I ended up doing, and which was kind of, I think, I don't know if it helped or not, to be honest, but I ended up writing a lot of riffs on like semi-hollows, like that kind of thing, like a jazz guitar, because it's really kind of an interesting approach I found, at least for me, of like, if you can make that sound heavy, you can get there. You know what I mean? Like it's already going to sound heavy when it's distorted, but you get a lot of those kind of weird nuances. But a lot of the songs that I wrote, I was I certainly stole maybe the wrong word. I was inspired by lots of things. So whatever, I'd listen to Mastodon and I'd be like, Jesus Christ, I can't play this, right? This was like my result most of the time of like, how in the hell do I play this? And then I would, I'd make up some riff that I think is sort of Mastodon-ish of like, but I couldn't get there, right? It's too hard. But what had happened is it basically just kind of like, it kind of helped me write in that, like, I'm trying to learn something, right? And I'm like, and then I would forcibly make it my own. It was, the funny thing I also learned is like on the drums, I can play everything in time. On the guitar, I suck. So I would have to like record a guitar part with like wonky timing, go lay down the drums, and I would be sitting here like an idiot running back and forth to play each part and try to get songs done. And but I was really like listening a lot at the time. I was taking guitar lessons, like jazz guitar lessons, and there's a couple, like Wes Montgomery and that kind of stuff, which doesn't apply for the record. But it teaches you about just sort of like, I think, different things, whether it's like, what's his face? Paige Hamilton always talks about those weirdo things that Helmet does in songs. They're kind of hard to hear, but it adds like a texture or a layer or whatever else. So I was listening to a ton of like really weird jazz, as well as like I was trying to learn how to play Judas Priest songs and Testament and all those kinds of things as a distraction, because the reality is the jazz was just so goddamn hard that I'd be like getting frustrated. So you want to go play Metallica. Right. And then the problem, of course, is like attention span out the window immediately. So I ended up with stuff that I think that kind of worked. So when we started writing the songs, the song, I think I already forgot what it's called on the record. We called it Delivery Service Forever. I think it's maybe the third or fourth song. I wrote that back in 2016. I still lived in San Francisco. I had drums set up. I was trying to record. I was having all these issues with carpal tunnel. And so that's when I started playing guitars. I couldn't play drums as much with the carpal tunnel. And I thought, well, if for whatever reason this is a permanent problem, like let me lay some stuff down. I talked to Crispy and I was like, look, maybe we should just see if we can record something. Like I'm gonna put down a bunch of drum tracks and scratch guitar. And that became the basis for the new record.
So you began writing that material as far back as 2016, 2017, you said?
Yeah. One of the songs, yeah.
When did the Deadguy come back together? Like for the Decibel article, when you guys started all talking to each other again?
It was 2021 when Bill Saunders got us
so
back
you were
together.
writing new Deadguy stuff even before all the reunion stuff happened, or did you know it was going to be Deadguy stuff? Were you just writing?
Just writing, man. I mean, I think it's like, I never really thought, look, you never know what'll happen in life. Like we could all burn tomorrow. But I thought, like, for better or worse, it was kind of like, this is what I can play. And it was sort of heavy, right? Heavy-ish kind of stuff. And, but I wrote a lot. And especially when I lived in Amsterdam, I was bored as hell. And so I mean, I would make whatever little videos or audio recordings of it. And 90% of it garbage, right? But it forced me to think about it, and it forced me to kind of think about whether it's song structures or whatever else, or what sounds right together. And I learned a lot more. Music theory is maybe way too generous, but I learned more about like how stuff fits together and what sounds right, and how to and when you play music that's like we do, which is a little bit awkward, a little bit sort of has that kind of odd tonality. It's very easy to go too far. That was like my big takeaway is and I like a lot of obviously very heavy bands, and believe it or not, I'm super into all the heavy stoner doom stuff, despite not being like that guy. And man, it's really difficult to record that and make it sound good. So I'm even more impressed by those things. And also, bands like Cynic or whatever else, but a lot of it came from a drummer, Bill Stewart, I'm a huge fan of, who plays with like Schofield and all these guys. And I just was really like trying to figure out, once we got into it, I was like, can I make this more interesting? Right. And there's a lot of tricks on the record. I mean, it's all analog in the sense that we did it all with Pro Tools. We played everything. There's stuff that we'll never reveal that are really weird and interesting sounds in the background that no one will ever know. And like I've also said, like, I'll never tell Keith all the guitar parts I played. Only me and Steve know. In terms of like the overdubs and stuff. But the thing is, man, I think like once you get in the zone, even if you have a day job or whatever else, like you can get there. I mean, we were doing the recording, like we did I think we did 3 songs, something like that. And then we went to Japan, came back, we played, every one of us got sick, like terribly sick kind of thing, in New York, by the way, not in Japan. Came back and recorded more. And then we were at the point of where at one point, Keith, like we needed a Slayer part. We called Keith and we said, you need to go write a Slayer part. And 15 minutes later, he sent us one. And then we were like in the final throes of one of the songs, and Jim got sick, like could not drive, couldn't do anything, like sick. And I was like, it's like we have 2 days left or something, to go do this. So I went to Guitar Center and bought a bass, wrote the bass line, went to the studio that afternoon. And so that was the kind of thing that was sort of whatever, an invention that occurs because you're too stupid to know better. But we're also like, look, we're not Metallica. We're not going to sit there for 6 months writing a record or whatever else. It's just not, it doesn't, I don't think it makes the music better for us. There's some degree of like, you need that energy and spontaneity.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that crunch is, how a lot of good things happen. I did that with the last thing I recorded. I really pushed us to write one more song, and I think it ended up being one of the best songs. So when you're short on time, short on money, and you just have to get it done, like I like that pressure. It's hard, but I like it.
Yeah, the opening song, the one that the Kilfee, I think was we ended up doing one more that same day. That we recorded the whole thing in about 2 hours, but Kilfee was the last song that we had done. And it was just like, okay, we're done now. And I that night before, I was like, I got this one more thing. Let's just try it. And I happened to get there earlier, and I was just playing the drum part, and it's on the album. I forgot what it's called. I have no idea what these songs are called. We had funny names for them all. So now when it becomes the what the hell is that thing called? We can refer back to it at a later date. Would be my
Yeah, there's the working title and then the actual title. What was it again?
It's going to be Knife Sharpener.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
That one's coming out. So we have another video that we're putting out soon. And so we'll get to hear that one as well.
So, this must be pretty exciting, right? Everyone's back. We're writing again. At what point, Tim told me that pretty soon after you guys got back together, we started talking about writing new music, right?
Yeah. A big part of it, certainly for me and Crispy, was it's not interesting if we're just a nostalgia act. And, some degree is like unfinished business. Like we had more in us, maybe, and Relapse definitely took a flyer on this. Like, this could have gone terribly wrong. When we first met Rennie, we were like, "Are you sure, dude? Like, are you cool? Like, is this like?" And he's like, "No. It's go see what happens." Is basically what they said. And so having that freedom was obviously like it was very generous of them, to say the least. But also it was like a huge vote of confidence to go and kind of do what we wanted to do. And we're all super happy with the record. So no two ways about it. But nothing is easy, man. Writing songs ain't easy. Recording's not easy. Nothing is. Getting this shit out the door is not easy. So I think now we have maybe a deeper appreciation for it, because back at the time you didn't care about suffering, and now you're like, I'm a little spoiled. Do I really need to suffer this way?
So what happens? When everyone's back together, do you and Crispy just show Tim and everybody else like, hey, we've been working on this stuff. What do you think?
Yeah, so we did like very good demos. We went to a couple of we used a rehearsal studio in Hoboken, All-Star, and we recorded like high grade demos. We did them at Jim has a rehearsal studio down in Red Bank, New Jersey, and we would do just like iPhone recordings and go back and just try to figure out if we're onto something. And then we went in and did the actual demos. And then I bought electronic drums. And so, which I got to be honest, I hated these goddamn things. And they were messing up my technique. And I was getting so aggravated by it. And it turned out it was like kind of a stupid problem, but I figured it out in the long run. So I bought new ones. But what we did is we basically said, hey, look, I'm going to give you drum tracks, right, with maybe some scratch guitar of what I think this goes here. And what me and Crispy has always done is sat there and said, well, we think this goes to this. You know what I mean? And this being a relative thing, like Kilfie actually has one of those parts that is like that. It's almost a noise part of just like the kind of thing. And that was like a conscious thing to be like, we think it needs to go to like this kind of thing so it can kind of go up and down, and Tim typically plays along the whole time and then is always the last to do his stuff. But Keith is actually a very good guitar player and very prolific as well. He just had a time crunch on all this because like Keith wrote one of the songs entirely. Naturally, I forgot the name of it. We called it Adirondacks at the time. And so one day we were like, Keith, write a song. He's like, blah, blah, blah. Next time he comes back and he literally has an entire song finished. And it's it's also the longest one. So I was like, you could have made like 3 of these, you know what I mean? A 4-minute epic, as we like to say in the Deadguy camp. So, fortunately, there's not a lot of pride of ownership. You know what I mean? Like we want to make something good, especially as like somebody asked me that. I was like, I am a mediocre guitar player at best. And part of being in a band is like, it's not a solo project, right? Like the whole point here is that like, I think these guys can make it better. And that's like what I'm trying to do is like, let me give you something here. I think this goes here to here to here. You guys figure out the rest of it. You know what I mean? And that worked, at least for this record. When we did the first record, we were playing so much that those songs were like, they were top of mind. I think I did the drums. I probably did 6 songs in one day. And the other 4,
really?
Yeah. And when we did this one, I don't think I ever did more than 2.5 in a day, which I don't know, good or bad. I mean, some of it was we were writing it in the studio and we're trying to work out parts, but I would also come home and be like, I didn't like that. I got to go back tomorrow and fix it. And some of the stuff, I don't think some of the songs that are going to come out a little bit later, I actually don't know how to play what I played. So it goes to show you, like, good for me. You know what I mean? I got there and I'm like, I got nothing. I don't know where to go with this. I've been trying to practice them. And I'm like, it's going to be something else this time. It's jazz, no one wants to hear the same thing twice. Yeah. So that's what I think. Like, I think what we'll like.
See, so you are playing jazz.
I am. Yeah. What do I know? Maybe nobody else is. Like Ginger Baker always thought he was playing jazz. Worked for him. But I think that will likely be, we already started working on more stuff. So we got a couple of things that we've worked on. And I think there's 2 ways to look at it. One is like, I'm totally cool to be like, hey, take this and go with it. I'd also be totally cool if everybody shows up with a whole song. Jim wrote a couple of bass parts that were just parts that we managed to say, okay, this goes here, right, and like move it around. And that if that works for us, then cool. Like I'm thrilled with it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the best way. I've learned that recently. I used to be too hung up on something being exactly my way. Not all the time, but sometimes. But that thing you're talking about where like I'll bring parts to a song, to band practice, and then everyone will make it better because they help arrange it. They say, well, try playing it this different way. And before I'd be like, no, it has to be this. But I'm like, all right, let me try it. And then I'm like, oh, that is better. I mean, that's the way it should be.
Well, I mean, this is why we play with other people, right? I mean, that's the whole thing. And like, it's that weird alchemy or whatever the right word is, right? That happens. And Crispy was always, even early on, was like, well, this is just what it sounds like when we play together. And you're like, at some point, you're like, yeah, you're right. This is what it sounds like when we play together. It's not necessarily good or bad. It just is.
So when Deadguy was originally together, Deadguy 1.0, as Tim was calling it, I was stunned to learn the first time he was on the show, he was out of the band before you even started touring on Fixation.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had no idea. And so when Tim is out, did you, he said, he wanted to move to Seattle, but like still be in the band. But he didn't really check if that would be okay. It was just like, I'm going to move to Seattle, but I'll still be in the band. And maybe the rest of you were like, that's not going to work for us. Like, is that what happened?
That's pretty much what happened. Yeah. I mean, we were not emotionally equipped at that age to deal with really anything. You know what I mean? Like, let alone like, hey, we do this thing every day, and now you're going to be like, I'm going to go to Seattle. And on the other side of that is like we got kind of stuck in Seattle, and me and Crispy and Pops hated it. So it was also like, so you're picking the place that we just told you sucked. All right, cool. So, I think it was just also, we had just, me and Tim had graduated. He'd been working full time. Keith had like a full time job, and I forgot he worked on like auto parts. Crispy still hadn't graduated. Nauman hadn't graduated. I think I just graduated college, and we went on tour like that month. And I mean, we didn't have any money. We didn't have cell phones or anything else. And so, you start to have a bad time out on the road, and you're like, Jesus, do I really want to be doing this all the time? And, we got back, and like, I don't think we weren't mature enough to know what to do with that. Right. And so like on one hand, I was like, hey, good for Tim. You're going to go make a life decision. On the other hand, I was like, it's just not realistic that this is going to work. And the other side of it is like, we were not important enough as a band to be like, oh, we're going to have this other guy living across the country. Like, it just wasn't realistic. We were not Metallica or whatever. At the time, it was like, Pantera was probably the big heavy band. We were never going to be Pantera. We weren't racist enough. So it was always a problem.
Thank you for saying that. People conveniently seem to forget that or choose not to remember it. I don't know. But so what happens? Do you let Tim know, like, hey, this isn't going to work for us, or does he quit? Like, how does it end?
Yeah, we just said we're not doing it, is basically what we said. We said we're either going to stop or whatever. If you guys want to go do that, that's cool. And then we thought, well, we'd stop. But then me and Crispy were roommates. And I think we actually, one of the few times we actually spoke to Tony Victory was we called Tony, and he's like, no. It's fine. Just keep going. And we said, well, change the name, this and that. And it was just kind of like, you built up all this kind of brand equity, whatever you want to call it. Do you guys really want to do that? And so, in the spirit of some degree of entrepreneurship / capitalism / stupidity, we just said, well, we'll just keep going, right? Like this is what you do. And it's sort of like you get divorced and you go make your bikini body, same kind of thing. So at the time, I remember it being just like very surreal, and like I just thought, boy, this is so stupid. On the other hand, you can't, like, I know enough now to be like, it's your life, right? You have to. So we just basically we made do. You know what I mean? Like we saw this was our opportunity to go do it, and we said, fine, we're going to go do it, and we had fun. That's the reality. Is like we had a good time. Tom Yak, we're all still friends. Tom Yak is still a close friend, and we had a good time. And, still nothing was easy. We still broke down all over the place. We still made $0 everywhere we played. But, it was a pretty low stress experience at that point. I think some of what made the band what it was early on was like that built-in tension of everything. It was definitely less tense at that point, but I also think we lost some motivation. That was really what happened. And as everybody always asks, well, you guys broke up. I was like, we didn't really break up. We just kind of stopped. We lost interest, and it was like, I've made a rule as an active older adult, that like when something is not fun, or if someone is a jerk off, like I go to a restaurant or whatever else, I don't go anymore. I don't do it. Like and it sounds like old man talk, but I was just like, why am I putting myself through something I don't enjoy at this point? And it's not as selfish as it sounds.
It's not. I have because I used to be friends with people for years who treated me horribly, or be in relationships for a long time that were bad. I'm 43 now, zero tolerance policy. Like if I meet you and you're a jerk, that's it. Like I'm not going to waste any time. I'm not going to give you 2-3 chances. I mean, there's no time. There's no time anymore.
Life is short. It's also long and painful. There's a lot of things to do out in the world. That's my feeling. I mean, I don't need to do this. Like like I'll go to like a restaurant or a bakery and I'll be like, this person's being like super rude. My wife's just get over it. I'm like, all right, but I also don't need to give them my money and a tip, and that's fine. Like I'm not going to begrudge them. I can't even give you an example, which goes to show you how important it is. But it's just not necessary, man. And like there's too much other bad shit in the world. You know what I mean? That I don't want to have some guy being an asshole when I'm trying to get a donut.
Yeah.
It's just not necessary.
It's not. Yeah. When Deadguy 2.0 was doing their thing, was it weird at all at the time, with the new lineup and Tim and Keith doing Kiss It Goodbye? I mean, was there like any contention from fans or like anything like that? How was it at the time?
There was a couple of, I still give Keith grief about this. There wasn't much contention from fans. There was a contingent of Keith worshipers who were like, this is BS, whatever, that this is now, there's Keith definitely wrote a lot of the parts. Me and Crispy wrote all the songs, period. So it'd be one thing to say, hey, look, yeah, these are, if Keith had written everything and we're now saying he's not in it. But look, those guys opted out, man. That was what it comes down to. I mean, I think hopefully Tim told you the same thing. They opted out. It wasn't like we said, get out. And so there was one or two. There's one guy in particular who now wants to be friends, and I refuse. And I refused to be funny, just for the record. Like if he actually wanted to be friends, I would do it. But I refuse to do it. This is my petty revenge. So no, it didn't matter as much as you think. And I would tell you, like, even now, it's kind of funny because we used to play a couple of the songs from, even in their recent past, we played a couple of the songs from the Screamin' record. Because me and Crispy and Jim wrote them, it was like, and Tom was like, yeah, do whatever you want. And people are like, I like those songs. And you're like, all right, well, cool. But it's also somewhat, I think, like, this is also some of that nostalgia thing of, at some point you got to move on, progress kind of drives the world. And, but no, it wasn't that. And we were mostly, both sides were pretty good about not talking a lot of trash. And it was some degree of a tacit agreement. And occasionally there was shit talking here and there. And when you look back on it, you're like, boy, was that absurd. Just like dumb commentary, like, whatever, you ate my Wheaties or whatever stupid shit, or like, he wore that dumb hat. You're like, this is the stupidest thing I've ever heard. So we got past that pretty quick, fortunately.
That's good. Yeah, when you're young, or at least when I was young, I would get mad at somebody and just never talk to them again. And then all the years go by and I'm like, wait, what was that all about?
Yeah. No recollection why I'm mad at you, but I the funny thing about it, and maybe not less funny, is that talking about Sean McCabe, like, no joke, that was the first time I was like, holy shit, this dude who I used to see all the time and always have fun with is no longer with us, and that freaked me out, right? But it didn't really register. But then as we got older, like, dude, man, people get sick, you know what I mean? Like, people around us started getting cancer and like dying, and you're like, what the fuck, and Pops, Tim Nauman, had a kidney transplant for like 7 years. This poor jerk was on dialysis every night, and I was living in California, and then I was living in Amsterdam, and I'd come back, and me and Crispy went out to dinner we're like, what do you mean? Like, he's like, yeah, dude, like this is my life right now. I was like, Jesus Christ. You know what I mean? Like, it's just, so I kind of decided we all sort of decided in still our bitter way, like, we're not going to let that stop things that we want to do, you know? And so some of it is just sheer force of will getting us out the door to do things or whatever. But the other side of it is like, it's a very, it's an unexpected opportunity to be able to play music people generally don't like to an audience and have people be excited about it and want to come see you and want to hear more. So, purely like, you have to look at it and be like, it's, to call it a gift is the wrong thing, but like, it's just real weird that we're able to do this and that people care. It was always weird that anyone cared. But now it's even weirder, to be honest, that people care and are pumped about it. And, we're not particularly sentimental, but it's like, it's a very strange thing to like feel sort of like I don't know, gratitude that anyone cares about anything you do. Like, you put out a podcast, right? It's the same thing as like the fact that anyone is pumped about it is like pretty gratifying.
Yeah. Yeah. Cause I forget quickly. Cause I do this show every week, someone new every week. And then someone will message me and say like, hey, that was great. And I'm like, oh, people listen to this. Oh, people like it. And I'm also too critical. So I think everything I do is bad or not good enough. And then, there'll be a conversation where I'm like, oh, I wasn't that smooth. Oh, it wasn't that good. And then a few people write and say, that was great. And I'm like, okay, it's all good.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, ultimately, look, you're doing it for yourself, right? You're doing it because you think it's cool and you think it's interesting and you want to do it. But, that was, I think, for us, the big eye opener. We played the Decibel Festival in Philly and people were pumped, but they didn't actually, I don't think most of them knew who we were. But it went good.
You think? I mean, I think there was a lot of hype around your reunion.
Yeah, 50%, I'd say. It went good. We no complaints. Then we started playing some good shows around, and then we went to we played the Damnation Festival in Manchester in the UK, and I mean, we played 2 nights. We actually played the pre-show party, and then we played the festival. Like, they did I forgot what they called it, and the funny thing was like it was a pretty mellow set of bands playing, and the guy who puts the shows, dude Gavin, who's a proper eccentric, who puts the lineup together, who runs this whole thing, was like, I think we probably are gonna need more security when you guys play. And we're like, I don't know what you're talking about. And within 30 seconds, it was pure anarchy. Like we were Warzone. And like they had to run and get all those dudes in the orange vests to come because it was total chaos. And that was maybe 1,000 people, and then the next night or whatever it was, the night we played, the next night, we played like the big stage, and they had it was like we were Slipknot, you know what I mean? There's just like all these security dudes because people were going absolutely nuts. And we're in the UK, you know what I mean? We'd never played there before. We knew they'd never seen a record. So that was like, it felt better as far as that goes. We played Japan last summer, and
how was that?
That was awesome. I mean, we played like club shows, basically like small places. And, first of all, I played with a couple bands that were awesome. This band Palm was like, whew, so damn good. And we played this dude from Loyal to the Grave, who are like a big hardcore band there. They're sort of like an Integrity Earth Crisis-y sort of thing, but popular. And so we played with popular bands who were super nice. And man, people were pumped. They're pumped that you're coming through, and that like, it's like this kind of that give and take of like, they're happy that you came to see them. Therefore, and like, we're happy that they came to see us. You know what I mean? Because, but it was awesome. I go to Japan a lot for work. So for me, it was kind of great because none of the other guys had been there. So this is actually where Near Death Travel Services came from. This is my travel agency, of my fake travel agency of this whole thing. But I only take you if there's something almost wrong with you. Like, so Pops came with us, who had the kidney transplant. Brian, who's our merch guy, he had COVID real bad, like hospital, like they gave him like a 20% chance of living kind of thing. So now I book travel only for people who are close to death, but you have to come out of it. Obviously, this is not near death.
Near death. Yeah.
That's where we got the name from. But those kind of things, man, it was a great experience in the sense that like we played a couple shows, but I got to take these guys running around Tokyo that they'd never been to before. right? And we got to do all these crazy things and eating noodles and going to all these dumb places and buying stupid shit. And that was great. Same thing with like when we went to Europe. I think Jim had been a bunch of places with Monster Magnet, but nobody else had been anywhere. And like, you if you've ever been to Paris, it's people, any stupid metalhead from New Jersey, like, oh, Paris. And then you get there and you're like, oh my God, everything is delicious. So for us, it was a great experience as a whatever you want to call it, kind of rebonding as adults, to be like doing these things that are, I mean, it's a rare thing to be able to go do. You know what I mean? Like I made the joke before, like we don't play golf. So like we're not going to play at St. Andrews. So the fact that we get to go play this ridiculous music in another country and go eat, like we're all in, we're ready.
I just had a thought. Have you guys played Seattle again?
We have not.
Now, would you do it, or would it be too much?
Look, this is what I was about. People are, believe it or not, we were actually booking a show with our homeboy Rich Hall, who passed away.
Yes.
Literally, as this was going on, we were emailing with Rich of like how he had us coming out to go play a special show, and then he passed away, which is a real drag. So we're playing the benefits for him because he was a long time friend of the family. But absolutely, it's been challenging. The one thing I think, I don't know if people have talked about this on the podcast, but like booking shows, even like 2 or 3 in a row, horrifically difficult. It's
even for you?
Oh, it doesn't matter. It's such a pain in the ass. Something is difficult. We can go, for the sake of argument, we can go play. We're going to do Richmond, Virginia in August. And it's great. And like, we're totally pumped to play Richmond, but like, okay, we should probably play DC or somewhere else, like on the way or whatever. And then you're like dealing with booking agents who suck nothing is easy. You can always get one show, but you need 2. This is the problem. So look, it's going to get easier. It gets easier, right? We have a manager now and all those kinds of things that help us. And when we go to Europe, we're booking some stuff for Europe. But it's funny. We talked to a guy today, and we're like, "How is this so difficult?" And he's like, "Trust me, this is how the entire industry works. There's not enough competency in it. There's not enough money in it, right, for most people to do that kind of work." And then what happened with COVID is that bands that were like trying to do it as a full-time job had no choice but to go back out on the road as soon as they could. So they kind of flooded the market. And then what's happened now is like we're now booking March and April of next year, if you can believe that.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. That okay, well, I find comfort that it's hard for you too, but I also feel much fear now because I'm trying to book September of this year and it's already May, and I'm like, are we even going to be able to do it? I don't know.
It depends. You never know. It depends on where you want to go and what you want to do and all that kind of stuff. Like you can play. There are places to play. It's more stringing it together and merch and all that other kind of stuff is. So I think like we're a little bit lucky in the sense that. Well, you have a day job, you know what I mean? So you can kind of backstop a little bit of it and kind of deal with it. But it's tough, man. Like we're gonna do the record release show, and we have another show that we're gonna do in Long Island, and they're good and they'll sell out and everything else. Dear God, was it a freaking insane amount of email and text and everything else to get like 4 bands to play the same show? You know what I mean? It's just like pain in the ass. So it's all right. I mean, I just don't want to have to do it myself anymore. That's what it comes down to.
Right. And you did all of that back in the day, right? Tim mentioned that you did a lot of the booking and the tour routing and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I did. The routing was always, so we had a really crap booking agent when we did the first tour, where they basically got us to California and then we're like, hey, see you dudes later. Enjoy your burritos. And so by the time we got to Seattle, that was really where the fracture occurred on the first tour, is because we were flat broke. We got to Seattle. We stayed with one of our roommates from New Brunswick who was going to grad school there, like whatever it was, 8 of us in a 8x10 cell, to do. And it was misery across the board. And so the next time we went out, though, we had a little bit more help because we had Victory, who had some help on that. And now obviously we've got some help with Relapse. And like I said, we just got a manager. We have a great booking agent for Europe. But it's tough, man. I mean, I think like people underestimate, look, we were using freaking maps, or like Magellan. And it could have been crossing the bridge or some shit. I don't know. So it was hard to tell. But the funny thing about it is that when I went back to school and like I worked in software, like turns out like I'm like a systems guy. I had no idea. I started doing a PhD in system science because it turns out like I'm good at that. Who knew that was my thing? I have no idea. So, it's a funny life skill, but I tell everybody, man, like if you want to know how to live in the world, go join a band and go on the road, even for a week. Like it's the single thing you can do to understand what it's like to actually have to live.
You'll understand navigation, people skills, business, performance, everything.
Everything. Yeah. It's the greatest thing. And I and people think I'm crazy. And I'm like, no, trust me, this is it. I learned everything. Sort of sad state, isn't it? I learned everything at like 23 and I've basically progressed not at all.
When Deadguy got back together, was the Decibel article the thing that initially brought everyone back together? Like, were you guys in the same room, or was that in the documentary?
No, the Decibel article was like, 2006 or 7, and we hadn't had any contact at that point. I lived in California at that point for probably, I think I must have lived in California at least 10 years at that point, something like that. And I was reasonably out of touch. We did the Decibel article and whatever, it was fine. We were super happy to have that. And then we fell out of touch again. I moved to Europe. Oddly enough, I think Tim said he saw some LinkedIn thing. I got to interview Bruce Dickinson for a work event, and it was like a holy grail. And somehow Tim happened to see this on LinkedIn and sent me a message. And I was like, this is unexpected. I wasn't even mad at that point. I wasn't mad at Tim anymore. And then Bill Saunders worked on this. He's like a producer editor for TV. And I met him when I was in Amsterdam and we became friendly. And at some point he's like, what if we did like a 15-minute thing about fixation? Cause it was like the anniversary coming up. I was like, dude, I don't think anyone cares, but sure, whatever. And he said, well, how can I get in touch with the other guys? And I said, I have no idea. I can get you Crispy. I can get you Pops. I can get you Tom Yak. I actually hadn't seen Jim in a long time. I was at a restaurant opening down the Jersey Shore and Jim walks in and he had a full beard and like he's got that curly hair. I'm like, who is this lunatic walking into this place? And he walks up and hugs me. I was like, oh my God. So it's so funny. And so we hadn't really had any contact. And then we set up this. Bill said, hey, look, let me try to get you guys in the same thing. And we did. And the funny thing, of course, is like it was always on the day that I was flying back to Amsterdam. I was like in New York for like a day or two, and I'd go back. So it was always this massive stress of trying to get to Hoboken. But that was the first time that we had been back together, and it was as if time had not passed, really. Minus hairlines and that kind of thing. And then we sat down to play, and kind of felt the same. Crispy was the holdout in terms of like, it's not interesting. He didn't want to be nostalgic. And that was sort of fell on me to get him over the hump on that. Tim and Keith are they're good in the ego department. They're always ready to do whatever. Crispy was always, me and Crispy always, even like the record now is like, man, maybe we suck. Like we thought that the entire time when we did the first album, we sat and listened to it in our crappy apartment and being like, this might be terrible and no one is telling us. Like that is, and I kind of feel that way now because like I can't listen to the record objectively. Plus, I had to be the one to listen to it over and over and over because basically, if you've recorded, like you can't have every guy listen to this thing and give feedback to the producer.
Well, I've been in that situation, but it's not fun.
No, I mean, I was on like vacation, Christmas. We were somewhere for Christmas, and like I'm listening to this thing on headphones and like insane volume to hear the nuances of whatever. But I think with Crispy, he wanted to do something that was interesting, right? And that's really what it comes down to. And so now, like I feel like we sort of purposefully push that envelope. Like, how do we make this more interesting? How do we make it entertaining for us is always number one across the board. But how do we make it more interesting such that we don't feel like we're just doing some whatever, we're not emptying trash cans.
Well, I've heard the first two singles. I love them. It sounds like you guys, which is what we want. Well, that's what I want. And we teamed with Steve Evans again to record this, right? That's exciting.
Steve, he's the best. Yeah, it was fun. I had been sending when I was still in Amsterdam, and this started when Bill started doing the documentary. He had gotten Steve's email, and we started emailing, and I spoke to him, and he's like, "What, do you have anything?" I was like, "I got like 70 songs. I'll just send you this SoundCloud." And he's like, "No, don't send me 70 songs. Go through and pick whatever." So I'd sent probably 15 to him and to Tim and said, "These feel like they're kind of in the realm." And then Steve went through and like picked whatever it was, 6 or 7 of them. I was like, "No, these are close, right? Like these are like in the ballpark." And then we sat on them for a while. I think maybe 3 of those, certainly at least 3 of the parts made it to the record. And then we just got real aggressive about really trying to write songs. That was what it came down to, is just got to keep going, got to keep forcing it like anything else. And yeah, I mean, look, it sounds like a Deadguy record. There's no two ways about it. That part I'm happy with, super happy with the sounds. I love that I was able to play guitar on it and never tell anyone where parts are. There's also some other things in there we did. I got to use a vibra slap, which is like the from Crazy Train. It's in the last song. So I'll put that one out. This is your exclusive there. There's a vibra slap in one of the songs, which I was super pumped about to be able to use that. So yeah, man, I mean, it's hard to look at it objectively, because now I can only hear like what sucks or should have done this part differently. But I think we made what we wanted to make, and hopefully will register.
I think so. It has to. And I'm surprised to hear that you would listen to Fixation and be like, "Wait, does this suck?" Because I mean, did you hear everybody over the years and the history of the record and the influence and people talking about it over the years? I mean, did you hear all of that?
I mean, a little bit. Not. I mean, some. I mean, certainly when I had to watch the documentary a bunch of times, and yeah, man, it's hard to tell. Like, I'm not saying that they're lying to me, but if you said to me this whole thing is fake, I'd be like, "Oh, okay, yeah." I don't know. I mean, it was. It's hard to look at something that you made really objectively like that, and really be able to see. I mean, it's funny. Like when I meet people now, and I'm like, sorry, I can't do your stupid meeting. My band is playing or whatever. I always try to explain. I was like, well, I can't tell you it was good, but I can tell you it was important. Like, we stumbled upon something that was important, not just to people, but like in the kind of scope of heavy music. And I always feel good about that.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. Like with anything that I do, even if people say it's great, I'm almost like, are they lying? Like they're lying. They're just being nice. So it's just this. It's the exception when I actually feel like, yeah, we did it. Yeah,
we killed it. Yeah, I don't know, man. I'm still not sure. Even like the new record, I do like it, and I like playing it. So I mean, I think that's a big part of it too. Is that I for a while I lived in California at one point. I had a friend who had he told me it was like a cowboy punk band. It was in fact a country band. Just no two ways about it. And he's like, "Dude, I need a drummer to sit in." And I was like, "All right." So I got there and I'm like, "You guys are wearing cowboy hats and like boots. What's going on here?" And I hated playing it, but I did it because it was sort of like fun-ish. It got to the point where I was like, I can't do this again. I'm willing to flee the country if I have to never play this again with you guys. So these songs are fun to play. I mean, I think in some ways it's always like I watch. There's like in one of the Rush documentaries, Neil Peart talks about like, why did I make this so hard? And the thing is like with heavy music in particular, even the songs that are out now, I did other versions, like I played other versions of them or whatever at home, where I went much way out. You know what I mean? A lot more fills, a lot more kind of craziness. It didn't really suit the song, and it kind of didn't suit the whole thing. And so that is sort of, I think, whatever, as a musician, it's kind of interesting to be like, okay, am I doing it right? Because like it's hard to think as a musician versus think as a drummer. And I studied with a guy named Tommy Igo, who's like a real big on the social medias, who is occasionally like an idiot. He makes a lot of comments that are like provocative, but his thing, when you actually take lessons from him, he wasn't like that. He was much more like, look, you got to serve the song. right? So like, are you playing what's right to serve the song? I also took lessons with a dude named Dave Illich, who's like a real big guy in the scene. And he had a kind of a similar thing of like, or when you hear this in 50 years, does it sound right? And it's like, what's the longevity of these things? And so when I listen to Fixation, unfortunately, I hear some of the mistakes, of course, but like, I get it. It holds up, right? It holds up. The what we did holds up. And most music today, like, I don't know, like a Dua Lipa or all these things that are like sold. And Dua Lipa, different animal. She's impressive to me because she bangs out songs left and right, but it's just candy. Cool. Like I love eating candy. Will it last? In 5 years, will anyone know who that is or any of the shit that's like this flash in the pan stuff? So, if you look at it from the perspective of what lasts, like you can get music to last, you can get art to last, books, those kinds of things. And so there was some degree of like a conscious effort to be like, for me at least, there's a bunch of weird flashy fills and stuff, right? Because I like, Mastodon. But I also had to go back and be like, is this serving the music correctly? Right. And it's actually very hard to do. That was my big takeaway. And that was what I learned from Tommy more than anybody else. And then when I started playing guitar, especially with the jazz stuff, I mean, like it's always less is more. Being able to shred is awesome for the record, but very rarely does it sound right, in that kind of music. And so we really were like, and Tim was one of the first ones to notice, like, these songs are pretty short, just all things considered. Trying to add a little bit of air into that is tough, So we try to do like, I'm a huge fan of Sleep, both literally and the band. Like, man, you can make the argument they go too far, but the last album, most of the last album with the astronaut floating in space with the like, that's Marijuana Knot, that song. Such a stupid title, but for a heavy song that leaves the exact amount of room and just goes slightly too far, dead on. It's like I use it all the time as an example of really well crafted. Like there's like Zeppelin songs you can look at and be like, this is the perfect song. They figured out the exact structure, and we did not do that. But I was consciously trying to be like, if I hear this in a year, am I going to be like, this is so stupid. I could have done this differently, especially in the age of like, what's his name? Like, the dude from Slipknot, who's unbelievable. Eloy. I was thinking of Eloy Casagrande, who plays drums, or Jay Weinberg, who are so goddamn good that they can play over everything. And I just thought like, man, I could have gone I did go in that direction to see what would happen. And then we had to just be like, it's not right. And that was, I hate to say I matured, but possibly this much. I went from like 15 to 15 and a half.
There's a fine line because Deadguy is different and techie and has interesting time signatures and all that stuff, but not too much, and then you like let's say newer bands in that realm, Dillinger Escape Plan. I think they do it right, but there's bands that do that sound where it's way too much, and I'm like, I can only listen to one song and then I'm done. So there's like, the way you described it is perfectly from your teacher, in service of the song. That's my approach too. I'm always in service of the song. Like, are we going nuts just to go nuts? Is this too much? And less always ends up being more. That's my philosophy. Because like in my band now, if we write a song that's longer than 3 minutes, what did you guys say with the 4 minute song? It's like, whoa, that's
like Geddy Lee over here. Is this like a Mahler symphony? I can't go that far.
Right. Yeah, that's just crazy.
I mean, the funny thing is, Keith is always like, I don't know, man, we're at like 3 minutes, 12 seconds. This is too long. And then he wrote like a 4.5 minute song. And so now we get to hold it against him all the time. Yeah. So it's, the next song that's coming out next week is 2 minutes and 9 seconds. And I got to tell you, I listened to it again because for the video. I was like, it's right. This is what's right. You have to learn. The other thing I think is hard for a lot of people, especially in heavy bands, is to have a groove that's not just a mosh part. You know what I mean? Like just having that sense of, because basically you having like John Bonham, sort of that style of you always want your bass player and your drummer to, one has to hold back while one plays over. And so in our case, typically the drums are slightly ahead, whereas like Zeppelin, the drums are always slightly behind, but it kind of either way gives you that kind of feeling of something moving, or motion, for lack of a better term. And it's really hard to do in heavy music, especially when you're playing, like, we played with those dudes to red chord. And man, I was like, holy Christ, I don't know how they can play this for an hour, like physically. It's like, it's just unrelenting. And then they go into these mosh parts that were so heavy. And I was like, I can't think that way. And bravo to you guys for being able to do this. And it's so great. And I actually talked to Guy from the band the other night. And I was like, he's like, dude, I don't know. Same thing. He's like, this is what happens when we play. And, Dillinger, an interesting one, because Ben and I are buddies, and we got to play with those guys not that long ago. And, they tried so hard to be weird that they got there, and it worked, which was kind of an unexpected thing. Like they pushed it. And then they finally are like, okay, we pushed it to the point. We're good. And that was very hard to do. It's like a tightrope kind of thing, man. Like they pull it off, and we played with them, and they play that shit live, and they also practice like crazy. So that's the other side. I think most musicians don't realize, like, even in us, Crispy jokes about it. He never practices, but he does. Keith practices every day. I practice every day. It's like, you got to keep going. It's the only way to make it happen.
So you'll actually play every day?
Yeah, every day.
Wow, yeah. That's a great discipline. I don't do that.
You got to keep the hands going. You got no choice, Plus, like, we do other dumb shit. I'm on the computer, or I go to the gym, and like I'm stiff, and then I sit down and I got a blister, and then I feel like an idiot. This is the life story of a drummer.
Well, we've got Near Death Travel Services coming out June 27th, so I'm very excited about that, and it was great hearing about some insight from the record. You seem like a real student of music. You've taken lessons, you play guitar now, you just taught yourself, what, in the past 10 years?
Yeah.
Wow.
Got to do something, man. Got to do something. I don't play golf. Maybe I should play golf now that I say this. I hadn't thought about it.
You're in the business world. It could open up some doors, right?
I live in New York City. What am I going to do? I'm going to go to like a simulator on Fifth Avenue. It's just not, yeah.
I could envision a new Deadguy album with like a weird golf motif. You know how Deadguy will do like it's like the dark commentary on the business world and all that stuff. Imagine that, but like in the golf world. That could work.
It feels like a strong concept. I suggest I'd like to subscribe to your newsletter, perhaps.
What else do we have coming up? You got more gigs coming up?
Yeah, we got the record coming out June 27th. We're playing a record release show in New Jersey on the 12th, and then we got some more shows that are a lot of stuff that hasn't been announced yet. We're taking June off. So Jimmy is a sound man, and he does the NHL. He does the Stanley Cup. So he's on the ice all the time, and so he's working all through June, and then we got a bunch of. And I'm going away, and I'm going to Japan and Korea in July, which, by the way, paving the way for us to go over there too. So those are great places to go play. And then we'll really start rocking it in kind of September, October for the rest of the year. And then, like I said, we're already booking, which is insane to me, things for March, April, May of next year.
Amazing. Oh, in the documentary, I remember there was a scene where we're waiting for Tim to show up, right? And I think it was you. Like you were like, is he going to show up? Is he not going to show up? Were you worried that he just wasn't going to show up? Like, what was going on? How long had it been since you saw him at that point?
24 years. But we had emailed a little bit here and there, but no other contact. I don't think. Maybe we might have done a Zoom something or other. I don't think so, actually. But yeah, it was funny because Tim, to his credit, lives on another planet to this day. He still is F the man across the board. So it was like, at the time, I'm like, well, maybe he's just lying to us. He's just not going to show up. And this whole thing is an elaborate stunt. But then Tim shows up and he just pops out of the car and says, hey, what's up? It's like, that's the kind of thing where you're like, what just happened here? So, it's funny. I think ultimately, the main thing I realized, man, is I could not remember why we were mad at each other. And which is also like just a ridiculous reflection on how stupid we were. But, it was true. Like, we just didn't know. And so, you don't go through these kind of, it's hard to have these kind of experiences of being out with a group of whatever, certainly in a band, right? And that's my only real example, but like, the fact that we got to go do all this crazy stuff, the fact that we played CBGBs like 10 times, right? Or that we did all these other things and gotten fights on the road with people and ourselves, and then kind of come back and get to do that. I think we recognized that it was important to us on some level, right? And so, everything just melted away, and it was all. Who knows? I'm sure we'll go out and it's a horrible fireball of anger again, but not this week.
Well, that's good. That's good. And Dave, I love the band. I'm glad you guys are back. I'm looking forward to the new record and to seeing you again. So thank you.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for having me. It was big fun.